Welcome, welcome. You're here at Omni Wizard. Today we present to you, what if Harry Potter lifted Mjolnir at age 7 and Odin claimed him as Asgard's champion? Like and subscribe if you want more awesome stories. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Chapter 1. The weight of nothing. The junkyard smelled like rust and old rain. Harry had learned to identify smells the way other kids identified colors, not because he found it interesting, but because knowing your environment was the difference between stepping on something sharp and not. Uncle Vernon's junkyard errands had taught him that. So had the cupboard under the stairs, which smelled like dust and the particular kind of loneliness that settles into walls over years. Today's job was simple, according to Vernon's red-faced morning briefing. Clear the back corner of Smelting's auto salvage, where a load of scrap had been dumped overnight without permission. Stack what could be stacked, drag what could be dragged. Don't make a fuss, don't break anything, don't expect lunch. Harry was 7 years old and 3 months, and he hadn't expected lunch since he was 4. He picked his way through the maze of crushed cars and tangled copper, piping with the focused calm of someone who had never had the luxury of being careless. His trainers, Dudley's old ones, 2 sizes too big, had been stuffed with newspaper at the toes. His jeans were held up with a piece of twine. His glasses, cracked at the left lens, sat slightly crooked on his nose because he'd fixed the broken arm himself with a strip of electrical tape. None of this bothered him particularly. It was just the texture of his life, the same way the sky was gray and the street was gray and the inside of the Dursley house was aggressively, proudly beige. He rounded a stack of flattened car hoods and stopped. The back corner was a mess: broken fence posts, rusted sheet metal, a tangle of old pipes, but sitting in the center of it, half buried under a sheet of corrugated iron, was something that didn't belong. It was a hammer. Short-handled, heavy-headed, made of some metal Harry had never seen before, dark gray and faintly iridescent, like a storm cloud that had decided to become solid. There were markings carved into the head, Norse, though Harry wouldn't have known to call them that, and a leather strap looped through the base of the handle. He tilted his head at it. It was in the way. Harry grabbed the corrugated iron first and hauled it aside because he was practical before anything else. Then he reached down, grabbed the hammer's handle, and lifted. It came up easily. Later, much later, when he had the vocabulary for it, he would describe it as the moment the hammer decided it recognized him. But in the moment, age 7, cracked glasses, twine belt, it just felt like picking up a hammer. The handle fit his palm like it had been sized for him. The weight was significant but not wrong, the way a good walking stick isn't wrong even if it's heavy. He stood up straight, holding it, and the sky fell apart. Not catastrophically, not like an explosion. It was more like a held breath releasing, a great, slow exhale from something enormous that had been waiting a very long time. The clouds above Little Winging, which had been the usual English gray, darkened to a purple so deep it was almost black, and then lightning walked across them in patterns that were nothing like the random branching of a storm. They were organized, almost deliberate. Harry looked up at the sky, then down at the hammer, then back up at the sky. "Huh," he said. The lightning cracked again, close enough now that he felt the static in his hair, and the rusted chain-link fence behind him glowed briefly gold. The air smelled like ozone and something else, something older, like stone and pine and distance. Then the light came down. It wasn't a bolt. It was a column, wide and steady and gold-white, dropping from the center of the storm to the ground 20 feet from Harry with a sound like the world clearing its throat. When it faded, a man was standing there. Old. That was the first thing Harry noticed, because he'd been around Vernon Dursley long enough to know that big and red-faced and loud was one kind of dangerous, but old and quiet and utterly still was a different kind entirely. This man was tall, broad-shouldered despite his age, wrapped in a gray cloak that moved in a wind Harry couldn't feel. He had one eye, the other socket covered by a simple patch, no drama, and a long white beard, and a staff and ravens. 2 of them, one on each shoulder, black as ink and watching Harry with an intelligence that was immediately unsettling. The man looked at Harry. Harry looked back. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The ravens shifted on their perches. "You lifted it," the old man said. His voice was deep and unhurried, carrying the particular authority of someone who had never needed to raise it to be heard. "It was in the way," Harry said. Something moved across the old man's face, not quite a smile, not quite surprise, but somewhere between the two. One of the ravens made a sound low in its throat. "What is your name, boy?" Harry Potter." "Harry Potter," the old man said it like he was weighing it, turning it over. Then he stepped forward, not fast, not threatening, but with the absolute certainty of someone who had never encountered a space that refused to make room for him. He stopped 10 feet away and looked at Harry with his single eye, and the look was the most thorough Harry had ever been subjected to. It went past clothes and glasses and twine belt, past the carefully more actions continue / next chapter chapter 2. The Golden City the morning Harry left for Diagon Alley, Thor cried. Not loudly, Thor did nothing quietly, but he'd apparently made an exception for this, just stood in the courtyard with his arms crossed and his jaw set in the way it went when he was refusing to let his face do something it wanted to do, and his eyes were absolutely, unambiguously wet. I'm going to a shopping district, Harry said, not a war. You don't know that, Thor said. I'm buying school supplies. In the mortal world. Thor said mortal world the way other people said active volcano. Alone. Hagrid's meeting me, Harry said. Odin arranged it. He'd read the second letter, the one from Dumbledore, via the half-giant groundskeeper, and found it pleasant enough, if slightly over-reassuring in a way that suggested Dumbledore was accustomed to managing nervous children and hadn't quite recalibrated for Harry. This Hagrid, Thor said. Is he large? Apparently. Half-giant. Thor processed this. And is he capable in a fight? Thor, it's a legitimate question. I'm 11 years old and I have a war hammer that was forged in a dying star, Harry said. I'll be fine. Thor grabbed him gently, which for Thor meant Harry's feet only left the ground by 2 inches, and pulled him into a hug that Harry returned with both arms and no embarrassment whatsoever, because 4 years of Thor had cured him of embarrassment about affection. It was one of the better things Asgard had given him. Come back intact, Thor said into the top of his head. Always do, Harry said, muffled by shoulder armor. Frigga's goodbye was quieter. She held his face in both hands the way she'd done since the first week. The gesture had started as health checks, making sure he was eating, sleeping, not running a fever from the early training exertions, and had become simply her way of saying she saw him. Be yourself, she said. Not anyone's symbol, not anyone's weapon, you. And if someone tries to make me a weapon, Harry asked. Her eyes were steady. Then you remind them, politely, that you are not theirs to make anything of. And if they're not receptive to polite, her mouth curved, then you remind them less politely. Odin walked Harry to the Bifrost himself, which Harry suspected was unusual, because Heimdall watched the approach with an expression that suggested he found it noteworthy. The Allfather said nothing until they were at the observatory's edge, the great horn of the Bifrost aimed at the grey coordinates of London. One thing, Odin said. Harry waited. Dumbledore is intelligent. He is also, in his way, kind. These qualities coexist in him, with the tendency to treat people as components of plans he has not fully disclosed. He paused. Do not let him manage you. He will try. He is very good at it. I know, Harry said. I've read about him. Reading about a person and meeting them are different things. They are, Harry agreed, but I've also met you and you're considerably more complicated than anything written about you. He looked up at Odin. I think I'll manage. Odin looked at him for a long moment. Then he put a hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, not heavy, just present, and nodded. Heimdall, he said. The light came down. Hagrid was exactly as large as advertised, which Harry found immediately reassuring in the way that things which match their descriptions tend to be. He was also warm in a way that was completely unguarded, the kind of person whose emotions arrived on their face before their brain had finished approving them, and he looked at Harry on the steps of the leaky cauldron with an expression of barely contained emotion that Harry recognized from Thor's more transparent moments. Harry, Hagrid said, and his voice was enormous and slightly cracked. Blimey, you look just like your dad. I've been told, Harry said. You knew him. Course I did. And your mum, Lily, she was brilliant, both of 'em, absolutely. Hagrid stopped, blinked several times, and pulled himself together with visible effort. Sorry. It's juice, seeing, yeah, it's a bit. He waved an enormous hand vaguely. It's all right, Harry said, and meant it. I don't mind. Hagrid looked at him properly then, past the initial wave of emotion, and something shifted in his expression. A slight recalibration, similar to Loki's in the corridor all those years ago, though coming from a completely different direction. Yes seem very, calm, Harry offered. Was goin' ter say settled, Hagrid said, for a kid who, well. I was expectin', Dumbledore thought. He stopped again, clearly wrestling with something. Dumbledore thought I'd be more rattled, Harry said pleasantly, by the revelation of the wizarding world. Well, Hagrid said. Yeah, Harry smiled. I've lived in Asgard for 4 years. The wizarding world is genuinely lovely by comparison, at least the buildings are proportionate. Hagrid stared at him. Then he laughed, enormous and involuntary, the kind of laugh that moves the air around it. Right, he managed. Right then, shall we Diagon Alley? Lead the way, Harry said. The leaky cauldron was dim and comforting, full of the smell of old wood and something alcoholic and warm, and the moment Harry walked in, Small, dark-haired, green-eyed, scar visible above the fringe, he hadn't bothered to hide because hiding things had never particularly appealed to him. The room went still. Not all at once, in pieces. A woman at the bar looked up, then grabbed her companion's arm. An old man dropped his copy of the Prophet. The barman Tom, Harry would later learn, stopped wiping the counter and stared with an expression of complete suspended animation. Then Harry Potter. He'd expected this in the abstract. Odin had explained the wizarding world's relationship to his name, and Frigga had contextualized it with characteristic precision. You are to them a symbol of survival. They have put a great deal of their hope in you without asking your permission. They will not behave rationally when they see you, at first. Be patient. Loki had added unhelpfully, they'll try to shake your hand. Let them, it's amusing. What he hadn't entirely anticipated was the feeling of it, the room converging on him, hands extended, names offered, gratitude pressing in from all sides with the urgent sincerity of people who had been waiting years to say something and weren't entirely sure what it was. An old witch named Doris Crockford shook his hand 4 times and kept coming back. A man named Quirrell, pale, nervous, wearing a turban that smelled faintly of something Harry's Asgardian training identified as wrong, touched his arm and said it was an honor to meet him, and then withdrew so quickly it was almost a flinch. Harry shook hands and said thank you and lovely to meet you, and quite all right, and maintained, throughout, the kind of easy calm that came not from indifference but from having processed his emotional responses to his own mythology well in advance, alone in his room in Asgard at age 9 with Frigga's guidance. He noted Quirrell. He filed it. Outside, through the grimy back wall that Hagrid tapped open with his umbrella, Diagon Alley expanded like a held breath released. Harry stood at the entrance and looked. He had seen Asgard. He had stood in the great hall under birds with impossible wingspans. He had watched the Bifrost and the Amber Sea and stars too close to be real. None of that diminished this, the slightly ramshackle magic of a street that had been built by humans who loved what they could do and had been doing it enthusiastically for centuries. Apothecaries and broom shops and a wand makers and an owl emporium and Gringotts at the top, white and imposing, and people in robes of every color moving through it all with the comfortable familiarity of people who had never needed to hide what they were. Great, isn't it? Hagrid said beside him, watching Harry's face. Yes, Harry said, and he sounded surprised, which surprised him. It genuinely is. Gringotts was marble and grandeur and goblins, with long fingers and longer memories, and the cart ride to the vaults was conducted at a speed that Harry found energizing and Hagrid found catastrophic. Vault 687, which Harry's key opened, contained a quantity of gold that he registered without particular excitement. Money had been theoretical in Asgard, where he'd never needed it, but with the practical recognition that it was his, left by his parents, which meant there was something of them here that he could hold in his hand. He took enough for the school year and pocketed the key. The vault Hagrid retrieved something from small, wrapped, clearly significant. Harry didn't ask about. He'd find out eventually. Everything found its way out eventually. Back on the street, the shopping was brisk and practical. Harry had a list and a good sense of what he actually needed, which made the whole thing considerably faster than Hagrid seemed to expect. Robes, fitted properly for the first time in his life and not Dudley's cast-offs. Scales and a cauldron and a set of files and a telescope. Books, which Harry scanned the titles of with the focused pleasure of someone who genuinely wanted to read all of them. The wand was different. Ollivander's was dim and smelled of sawdust and something ancient, and the man who appeared between the shelves had eyes like an overcast moon, pale silver, all the way through, disturbing in a way Harry couldn't quite name. I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Ollivander said. Harry Potter. Then you know who I am already, Harry said. So we can skip that bit. Ollivander blinked. Then something shifted in those unsettling eyes, not offense but recognition of a kind, the sharpening of a craftsman presented with unusual material. Quite so. Your mother, Lily Potter, willow, 10¼ inches, swishy, excellent for charms. Your father, mahogany, 11 inches, pliable, excellent for transfiguration. He tilted his head, and you will be something else entirely. He went through 7 wands before anything interesting happened. Harry tried each one with the patient compliance of someone who trusted the process, and each time nothing much occurred, which Ollivander watched with increasing fascination rather than frustration, because each failed wand was apparently telling him something. The 8th wand was holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches. Ollivander held it out with an expression Harry couldn't quite read. Curious, Ollivander said, before Harry had even taken it. Very curious. What is? Harry said. The phoenix whose tail feather resides in this wand gave another feather, just one other. The wand that shares its core, it is the wand that gave you that scar. Harry took the wand. The warmth was immediate, not the warmth of Mjolnir, which was elemental and enormous, but something more particular, like a key fitting a lock that had been waiting specifically for it. Gold and red sparks drifted from the tip, and the candles in the shop flared briefly. "Well," Harry said. "Indeed," Ollivander said. He looked at Harry for a long moment. "It is strange. Most who come here, there is a sense of meeting their wand for the first time. With you," he hesitated. "It is as if the wand has known you were coming, as if it has been waiting. I have been making wands for nearly 300 years, and I have only felt that once before." Harry set the wand down on the counter and picked it up again, just to confirm the warmth was consistent. "The one that gave me the scar," Harry said. "Yes." "We'll get along fine then," Harry said, and he said it like he meant it, pleasantly, evenly, with the absolute confidence of someone who has looked at the worst-case scenario and found it manageable. Ollivander watched him go with an expression that suggested he would be thinking about Harry Potter for a very long time. The owl found him. That was the only accurate description of it. He was passing the magical menagerie when something struck the window from inside, not panicked, not frantic, just a single deliberate impact, and he turned to find a snowy owl regarding him through the glass with an expression of absolute certainty. He went inside. He looked at her. She looked back. "All right," Harry said. She held out her leg for the carrier tag with the dignity of someone who'd already decided this was sorted. He named her Hedwig on the walk out, after a name he'd found in a history of magic the previous year, a medieval saint of whom he'd been particularly fond of a story about. She sat on his shoulder and ignored Hagrid completely, and Hagrid, who was enormous and therefore found it difficult to be ignored, looked between her and Harry with an expression of mild offense. "She's very," he started. "Yes," Harry said. "Don't usually take to people that fast." "She didn't take to me," Harry said. "She recognized me. There's a difference." "Is there?" Harry reached up and scratched Hedwig's chin. She closed her eyes in profound satisfaction. "One is luck," Harry said. "The other is a decision." Draco Malfoy found him outside Madame Malkin's robe shop, which Harry suspected was not accidental. The boy was pale blonde, angular, wearing robes that were already fitted and expensive, and carrying himself with the particular posture of someone who had been told since birth that they were important and had chosen to believe it. He was also Harry's age, or near enough, and he had eyes that were doing the same survey Loki's had done, except where Loki's survey was a chess player looking for pieces. This was a different game, a boy looking for hierarchy. "You're Harry Potter," Draco said. "I am," Harry agreed. Draco extended a hand with the automatic confidence of someone who expected handshakes to be accepted. "Draco Malfoy." Harry shook it. The name landed with the slight weight of something he'd read. Malfoy, old wizarding family, Death Eater connections, switched sides at the end of the war in a technical and complicated way. He filed it without changing his expression. "Just getting your robes?" Harry asked. "Already done," Draco said. "You, just finished." Draco fell into step beside him with the assurance of someone who had decided Harry was worth knowing and was apparently unaccustomed to the idea that the inverse might need to be established. "I hear you've been abroad," he said. "Not with relations." News traveled in the wizarding world Harry had gathered, particularly news about him. "Asgard," Harry said. Draco's step faltered slightly, just slightly, a half-beat. "Asgard," he repeated. "As in, the Norse realm, yes. You've been living in Asgard." Draco's voice was carefully neutral in the way that voices go when they're working to contain something larger. "For 4 years," Harry said. "With the Asgardians, yes." Draco was quiet for a moment. Harry watched him from the corner of his eye, the processing happening behind the pale eyes, the rapid recalibration. Draco Malfoy was intelligent, Harry noted. That was worth noting, because intelligent people were interesting even when they were being difficult. "Your blood status," Draco said finally, testing, but carefully. "Your half-blood, your mother was Muggleborn," Harry said. "Yes, some people consider that. I know what some people consider it," Harry said pleasantly. "And I've spent 4 years in a culture that sorts people by whether they are worthy rather than what they were born to. I find I've been spoiled." Draco looked at him. There was something in that look, complicated, layered, that was not hostility, not entirely. Something more like a person who has been handed an answer to a question they haven't quite formulated yet. "You'll be at Hogwarts," Draco said. "I will. I'll be at Hogwarts." "I assumed," Harry said. "Slytherin," Draco said, and the word carried weight he'd clearly meant to be intimidating, or at least definitive. "Probably," Harry agreed, which was not the response Draco had been expecting. He turned slightly to look at Harry with something that might have been genuine surprise. Harry smiled. You're pragmatic, you're clever, you're self-preserving, and you care enormously about appearing not to care about things. That's Slytherin. It's not an insult. Draco stared at. See you at the sorting, Harry said, and walked toward Hagrid, leaving Draco standing on the cobblestones of Diagon Alley with a slightly stunned expression that he would spend the next 2 weeks trying to convince himself hadn't happened. The train back to Asgard, Heimdall's Bifrost, technically, from a designated point in Hyde Park that looked like an ordinary piece of pavement, was the first time Harry had been truly alone since the letter arrived, and he spent the transit thinking. He thought about Quirrell's wrong smell, about the stone Hagrid had retrieved, about Dumbledore's carefully worded welcome letter that had told him exactly enough and precisely nothing, about Draco Malfoy's complicated eyes. He thought about his parents' vault, full of gold they'd left before they died, and the way holding his mother's vault key had felt like something pressing from behind his sternum. He thought about the wand in his pocket and the hammer, currently the size of a large pen, tucked in his breast pocket, and the strange doubled sensation of being two kinds of magical at once. He thought about what Frigga had said, be yourself, not anyone's symbol, not anyone's weapon. The Bifrost arrived in the Asgardian observatory with its usual summary efficiency, and Harry stepped out into the familiar amber light, and Hedwig ruffled her wings and settled, and the gold city gleamed ahead, and he felt, as he'd never quite felt in Surrey in 4 years of trying, like he was coming home. Thor was waiting at the bridge, not subtly. Well, Thor demanded. I need to tell you all together, Harry said. Is there dinner? There's always dinner, Thor said. He fell into step beside Harry, and after 2 steps he slung an arm over Harry's shoulders, which was partly affection and partly, Harry knew, the simple impossibility Thor had of being near someone he loved without some form of physical contact. Was it terrible? Thor asked. No, Harry said. It was interesting and a bit sad and rather magical. He paused. And there's a professor at the school who smells wrong. Thor's arm tightened. Wrong how? Like something dark is sharing the space where he should be. Harry looked up at the 2 bright stars appearing in the early Asgardian evening. I think Voldemort isn't quite as gone as people hope. Thor was quiet for a moment, a genuine moment, not a pause for effect. And I'm going back, Harry said. Obviously, Thor agreed, and his voice was the same complicated mixture of pride and worry that Harry had come to associate with all of his Asgardian family, the particular brand of love that said I trust you completely and would also very much like to wrap you in celestial armor. I'll be careful, Harry said. You'll be you, Thor said, which is better. Dinner was long and loud, which was usual. Harry told them everything, methodically, starting with the leaky cauldron and ending with Draco Malfoy on the cobblestones, and his audience was attentive in their various ways. Thor with his elbows on the table and his expression cycling between outrage and delight depending on the detail, Frigga listening with her hands folded, asking 3 questions at precise moments that changed how Harry understood what he'd been describing, Loki present but apparently reading, which meant he was listening more carefully than anyone. When Harry mentioned Quirrell, Odin set down his cup. Describe the smell, he said. Old, Harry said. Dark. Like something that should be dead is using something alive as a, he searched for the word. Vessel, Loki said, without looking up from his book. Yes, Harry said. Loki turned a page. Possession, partial or complete, difficult to say from a smell alone. The host retains some function or they wouldn't be able to walk around a school. So partial, he glanced up. A Dark Lord using a professor as a meat puppet is objectively a poor long-term plan. What does he want at the school? Something Hagrid retrieved from a vault, Harry said, small and wrapped. Hagrid works for Dumbledore, and Dumbledore moved it out of Gringotts the same day I was there. Deliberate timing, Frigga asked. Or convenient, I'm not sure yet. Harry looked at Odin. You said Dumbledore manages things. Is he managing this? Almost certainly, Odin said. The question is how, and whether I'm part of the management, Harry said. You are, Loki said, closing his book. You were always going to be. The prophecy, I know about the prophecy, Harry said. Loki looked at him. Do you? Neither can live while the other survives, Harry said. Voldemort heard the first part and acted on it, which started the whole chain of events. Whether the prophecy is actually binding, or just narratively convenient, is a question I find genuinely interesting. He picked up his fork. It doesn't change what I'm going to do. Which is, Odin said. Go to school, Harry said. Learn what I can. Find out what's in the school that Voldemort wants badly enough to ride around in a professor and deal with it, and not be managed. He said the last part looking at Odin, who received the look without any visible discomfort. Good, Odin said. There's also, Harry said, a tournament I've read about. Well, not a tournament, more a sorting ritual called the Triwizard Tournament. It's not happening this year, but I find the concept interesting. Focus on this year, Frigga said. I am focusing on this year, Harry said. I'm also looking further ahead. It's a habit. It's a good habit, Loki said, and picked his book back up. The remaining weeks before September 1st were full in a way Harry appreciated, days with Thor in the training yard that had become less instruction and more genuine combat between equals, which was saying something given that Thor was 1,000 years old and roughly the size of a medium building. Harry could not beat Thor. He could, which was notable last. He could read the rhythm of someone vastly more powerful than himself and find the edges of it, the moments where size and strength were disadvantages as much as assets, and that was the skill Frigga had been quietly angling him toward for years. You will face things you cannot defeat by force, she told him when he was 10 and frustrated after an impossible sparring session. Learn to navigate around power. Learn to redirect it. Learn that the most formidable response is sometimes to simply not be where the force is aimed. You've stopped trying to win, Thor noted, one afternoon 2 weeks before September 1st, sitting across from Harry in the dust of the training yard. They'd been sparring for 2 hours, and Harry had redirected a blow that should have ended the session into a throw that put Thor briefly off balance, which was the most Harry had ever achieved. I've stopped trying to win the way you win, Harry said, getting his breath back. You win by being stronger. I win by being right about where you're going to be. Is that winning? Is the outcome different? Thor considered this. When I fight, he said slowly, I fight to fight. There is a joy in it, the collision of strength against strength. You fight to finish. Even when you are enjoying it, you are working toward resolution. He tilted his head. That is a different relationship with conflict. Is it better or worse? Harry asked. It is yours, Thor said, which is what matters. He put out an enormous hand and pulled Harry to his feet, and they walked back toward the palace in the amber evening, and Harry felt the solid warmth of Thor's presence beside him the way he felt Mjolnir's weight, not heavy, but present and deeply, specifically his. The last evening before the Hogwarts Express, Loki found him on the palace roof. Harry was sitting on the edge, legs dangling over an extremely impressive drop, watching the Asgardian stars arrive, and Loki appeared beside him with the particular lack of sound that was either his natural stealth or a subtle use of magic, and Harry had never quite decided which. I have something for you, Loki said. Harry turned. Loki was holding something small, a ring, plain and dark, with a single carved character Harry recognized as a bindrune. It's a communication anchor, Loki said. Keyed to mine. If you need, he stopped, reorganized his sentence. If something occurs that exceeds your considerable capacity for self-sufficiency, this will allow you to call for help, Harry said. To notify me, Loki said, which I will then assess and, Loki, Harry said. What? Thank you. Loki looked at him with the expression Harry had come to think of as his genuine face, the one that appeared briefly between performances. Don't make a thing of it. I won't, Harry said. He took the ring and put it on his right hand. The rune warmed briefly against his skin. Do you want me to be careful? I want you to be effective, Loki said. Careful is what people say when they mean they want you to come back unchanged. Effectiveness requires change. He looked out at the stars. You will be changed by this. I know, Harry said. And Harry looked down at his feet, dangling over the long drop, the amber sea far below catching the starlight. And I think I'm ready, he said. Not because I know everything that's coming. Because I know enough about myself that what's coming can't take me apart. He looked at the ring on his hand, at the rune carved small and precise. 4 years, Loki. You know what they gave me. What? Language, Harry said. For things I always felt but couldn't say. Worthy, family, home, he paused. I didn't know those words applied to me before. Now I do. Loki was quiet for a long time. Insufferable child, he said finally, and it was the warmest thing he'd said all evening. You'll miss me, Harry said. I miss no one, Loki said. You'll miss me, Harry said again. Loki stood and pulled his cloak closed and walked toward the roof door without a backward glance. At the last moment at the door, don't die in a school. I'll do my best, Harry said. The door closed. Harry sat on the palace roof for another hour, watching stars that didn't exist anywhere in the mortal sky, committing them to memory against the day he'd need them for something. Then he went to bed and slept well and woke up ready. Chapter 3, The Letter and the Lightning. The Hogwarts Express left King's Cross at 11 o'clock, and Harry was on it by 10:45, which was a personal record for punctuality, given that he'd had to navigate Platform 9 3/4 for the first time by watching a freckled family of redheads walk straight at a barrier and disappear. He'd followed without hesitation. The barrier was just a barrier. He'd walked through dimensions. The platform on the other side was steam and noise and organized chaos, trunks being loaded, owls protesting, parents conducting increasingly emotional goodbyes. Harry stood for a moment and took it in. Hedwig was in her cage on his trolley, watching the other owls with the detached superiority of someone who has decided they are in a different social category. His trunk was packed efficiently: robes, books, Mjolnir in its reduced form on a simple cord around his neck, and a small leather journal Frigga had pressed into his hands that morning with the instruction to write down the things he noticed and couldn't yet explain. "You have good instincts," she'd said. "Don't let them outpace your evidence." He found a compartment near the middle of the train, stowed his trunk, settled Hedwig's cage on the rack, and sat down. Through the window, the platform moved past in pieces, the red-headed family again, the mother tearfully fixing a smudge on the youngest boy's nose, two identical older boys who were clearly planning something and doing it loudly, a girl with brown hair and a stack of books taller than was probably practical for a train journey. The compartment door slid open. The red-headed boy leaned in, a rat in his shirt pocket and an expression of hopeful uncertainty. "Everywhere else is full," he said. "Kinda." "Of course," Harry said. He came in and sat down across from Harry and immediately spotted Hedwig. "Is that a snowy owl?" "Yes, Hedwig. She's brilliant." He looked at Harry. "I'm Ron." "Ron Weasley, Harry Potter." Ron's face went through several distinct phases in rapid succession: recognition, surprise, the specific recalibration that Harry had now seen enough times to identify immediately. But what he appreciated about Ron in those first 30 seconds was that the recalibration was fast, and what came out the other side was just curiosity. Genuine, unaffected, no performance. "I heard you'd been somewhere," Ron said. "Abroad. Asgard," Harry said. Ron stared at him. "As in, actual Asgard. Norse gods Asgard. Asgardians prefer not to be called gods," Harry said. "It's technically accurate, but they find it reductive." "You've met them." Ron's voice had gone very flat in the way that voices go when the brain is working very hard. "The actual Thor. He trained me," Harry said. Ron sat back in his seat, looked at the ceiling, looked back at Harry. "Right," he said. "Okay." A pause. "Is he what's he like?" "Because the legends," loud, Harry said. "Warm, absolutely convinced that the solution to most problems is hitting them harder, occasionally correct about this." He smiled. "He's my brother, more or less." "You're right," Ron said again. Then, with the tone of someone deciding that processing could happen later, "Do you like chess?" Harry liked Ron immediately. They talked for an hour. Chess, Quidditch, Harry had read about it. Ron could talk about it indefinitely and did. Ron's brothers, Fred and George, who had been on the platform building to something that Ron described as probably illegal with the particular resignation of a youngest sibling, and what Hogwarts would be like. Ron wanted Gryffindor, had always wanted Gryffindor, 4 older brothers in Gryffindor. The family expectation was Gryffindor. "What do you want?" Harry asked. Ron blinked. "Gryffindor, because of your family or because of you?" Ron opened his mouth and then closed it again. It was an interesting thing to watch, the question landing somewhere real rather than bouncing off. "I both," he said finally. "But also, yeah, I think I'd want it anyway. I'm not subtle enough for Slytherin, and I'm not patient enough for Hufflepuff, and I'm not," he gestured vaguely. "I'm not, or I don't know, a scholar type." "Ravenclaw has plenty of people who aren't scholar types," Harry said. "They're just curious about things. You're curious about things." "You've asked me 12 questions in the last 40 minutes. Ron looked slightly caught out. "That's just you're interesting. Most things are interesting," Harry said. "That's sort of the point." Ron looked at him with the expression. Harry was collecting these, the way Frigga had taught him to observe people, of someone encountering an idea that reorganizes something they'd already decided. The compartment door opened again, and this time the girl from the platform appeared, still carrying an impressive quantity of books. "Has anyone seen a toad?" she said. "A boy named Neville's lost one." "No toad," Harry said. She looked at them both with the assessing precision of someone who has been classifying people since she could read, which Harry suspected was very young. Her gaze moved from Ron, quick, categorizing, to Harry, where it paused. "You're Harry Potter," she said. "I am," Harry said. "I've read about you," she said. "Well, there isn't much to read about. You're more implied than discussed. Most of the historical record treats you as an event rather than a person, which I find methodologically weak." She sat down as if she'd been invited, which she hadn't, but Harry gestured toward the seat anyway. "Hermione Granger. I've memorized all the course books." "Have you? What house do you think you'll be in?" "I've been doing research. Harry's been in Asgard for 4 years, Ron said, with the tone of someone deploying a conversational grenade. "Training with Thor." Hermione turned to Harry. Something in her expression shifted, not the starstruck recalibration Harry was used to, but genuine intellectual ignition. Her eyes sharpened. "Asgard," she said. "The realm. Have you actually been there? Is the cosmology accurate?" The prose Edda describes 9 realms arranged around Yggdrasil, but the details are obviously filtered through a medieval Scandinavian lens. The details are filtered through every lens that ever looked at them, Harry said. Asgardians find most human mythological accounts of them partly accurate and deeply embarrassing, like finding your baby photos in a museum. Hermione stared at him. Then she laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, unguarded in a way that her whole manner suggested was unusual. She covered it quickly, but Harry had seen it. What are they actually like? She said. The realms. Is Yggdrasil real? Harry said. Yes, enormous. The scale is your mind adjusts to it eventually, but the first time you see it is genuinely destabilizing. Hermione had produced a notebook from somewhere in her enormous book stack. Harry looked at it and then at her. May I? He said. She handed it over, slightly puzzled. He found a blank page and drew, not artistically, but precisely the way Frigga had taught him to record things. The structure of the realms as he understood them, the relative positions, the Bifrost's function, Yggdrasil's scope. Hermione watched him draw with an intensity that reminded him of his own best days in the palace library. He handed it back. She looked at it for a long moment. This is better than any source I've found, she said. Can I keep it? Harry said. She looked up at him with an expression that he identified, after a moment, as gratitude of the specifically meaningful kind, not for a kindness, but for being taken seriously. He understood that particular flavor well. The train arrived at dusk, and the boats across the lake were magical in the way that things are when they've been the same for centuries and don't need to try. Harry sat in a boat with Ron and Hermione, and a round-faced boy named Neville, who was holding a toad named Trevor with both hands and the desperate concentration of someone who has lost him twice already. The castle appeared from the water like a sentence completing itself. Harry had seen Asgard. He was not easily impressed by architecture, but Hogwarts, weathered and enormous, its towers catching the last light, its windows warm against the approaching dark, its entire presence carrying the particular weight of a place where extraordinary things had been ordinary for a very long time, did something to him anyway. He understood why people loved it before they'd been inside. He understood why his parents had loved it. The thought arrived quietly and sat with him for the rest of the crossing. The Great Hall sorted students with the assistance of a tattered hat that sang, which Harry found genuinely charming in the way that old and slightly absurd traditions are charming when they belong to something real. Stood in the line of first years and watched. Hermione went to Gryffindor. The hat barely touched her head. Ron went to Gryffindor. The hat took 30 seconds, which Ron later described as feeling like it was considering something it wasn't sure about. Potter, Harry. The hall went quiet. Not gradually, all at once, a held breath, every table and every upper year and every teacher at the staff table going still. Harry walked forward without hurrying, set the hat on his head, and sat down. The hat was immediately, unexpectedly interesting. Well, it said inside his head, "This is different." How so? Harry thought back. Most children come to me with the shape of themselves mostly formed by want and fear. What they want to be, what they're afraid of being. The hat seemed to pause, which was strange for a hat. You know what you are. I've had time to think about it, Harry said, so I see. A longer pause. There are 4 houses and I am looking for your edge, the quality that leads, the nature that dominates. But you are another pause. Brave, unquestionably. Loyal at a depth that most adults never achieve. Curious in the way of someone who treats knowledge as a living thing. And the cunning, you have the Slytherin mind, child, the chess player's patience, the long game thinking. You have all 4. Then choose the one that fits best, Harry said. I don't have a preference. That, the hat said, is itself a preference. A moment's silence. Tell me, if you had to protect one person and could only choose one quality to take with you, what would it be? Harry thought about Thor in the training yard, Frigga's hands on his face, Odin on the palace roof, Loki's ring on his finger. Loyalty, he said. Then, Gryffindor. The red and gold table erupted. Harry took the hat off and walked over and sat down, and the noise around him was warm and alive, and Ron clapped him on the shoulder with a grin that was completely genuine, and Hermione leaned across and said something about statistical probability that he didn't quite catch but appreciated the sentiment of. At the staff table, he had a clear line of sight to the headmaster. Dumbledore was watching him with an expression of benign, pleased interest that was so perfectly calibrated to seem natural that Harry recognized it immediately as performance. Harry met his eyes and smiled pleasantly. Dumbledore's pleasant expression didn't waver. He was very good at this. Harry made a mental note, the way Frigga had taught him, and turned back to Ron, who was explaining the sorting to Neville, who looked slightly traumatized. The first morning's classes arrived with the chaos of new timetables, and Harry navigated the castle's geography with the help of 3 days of intensive study of a map he'd borrowed from a ghost, nearly headless Nick, who had attached himself to the Gryffindors with the cheerful persistence of someone who'd had 400 years to perfect the art of being helpful. Charms was taught by Professor Flitwick, a small and energetic man who was delighted to the point of actual squeaking by most things his students did. When Harry's Wingardium Leviosa on the first day produced a feather that rose to the ceiling, hovered there in perfect stillness for 5 seconds, and then drifted down precisely to where he'd been looking, Flitwick made a sound that was technically a word and mostly just joy. Extraordinary, he managed. The control I've never seen first year. I've had practice with similar mechanics, Harry said. Asgardian energy direction isn't entirely dissimilar to wandwork in principle. Flitwick stared at him. You've been to Asgard. Yes, Professor. And you studied. I studied with Queen Frigga primarily, Harry said. Her approach to energy direction. Flitwick sat down, which was dramatic given that he'd been standing on a pile of books. Queen Frigga, he said, the most accomplished practitioner of Sather magic in the 9 realms. She's very good, Harry agreed. She'd be very modest about it, but yes. The other Gryffindors at the surrounding tables were listening with varying degrees of attempt to pretend they weren't listening. Hermione had stopped pretending and was openly taking notes. Transfiguration was Professor McGonagall, which Harry had read about and looked forward to. She turned her desk into a pig and back again before anyone had finished sitting down, which was an excellent way to establish expectations. Harry watched the transformation with the focused appreciation of a craftsman observing another craftsman's technique, the economy of movement, the precision of intention, the way she made the difficult look like inevitability. The lesson was converting matchsticks to needles. By the end of it, Harry had produced a needle of precise length and calibration with a small Gryffindor lion worked into the head, because the needle was done in the first 90 seconds, and he'd had time. McGonagall looked at his work for a long moment. You've had instruction before, she said. Yes, Professor. Substantial instruction. 4 years. She picked up the needle and examined the lion, set it down. Mr. Potter, she said, in the tone that Harry would come to associate with her being genuinely surprised and choosing to process it as assessment rather than emotion, I would like to speak with you after class. Of course, Harry said. After class, she told him she would be adjusting his practical work upward to challenge him appropriately. He told her he was grateful. She told him she expected him to maintain the same standard as everyone else on the theoretical components, because practical facility without theoretical grounding was a house built on charm and luck. He told her he agreed completely. She looked at him for a moment. Professor Dumbledore mentioned you'd be unusual, she said. That's kind of him, Harry said. He meant it as preparation, she said. I find I need less preparation than he anticipated. She paused. You have your mother's eyes. People keep saying that, Harry said. It's because it's true, she said, and something in her voice made it clear the conversation was about to close, not because she was being unkind, but because she was not in the habit of letting herself be moved during school hours. Dismissed, Mr. Potter. He was at the door when she said, without looking up from her marking, Your mother was the finest student this school produced in 20 years. I thought you should know. Harry was quiet for a moment. Thank you, Professor, he said. He meant it. Defense against the dark arts was the problem. Professor Quirrell taught it with a stammer and a nervousness that Harry had initially categorized as just that, nerves, but which he now understood was the divided consciousness of a man hosting a passenger. The class sat in rows and learned the theory of dark creature defense, and Quirrell's hands sometimes went still on the desk in a way that was out of sync with the rest of him, and his eyes occasionally refocused with a quality that was not Quirrell's quality. Harry sat in the 3rd row and paid complete attention. Not to the lesson, he knew most of it already, and what he didn't know he could find in the library. He paid attention to Quirrell, the pauses, the tells, the moments when something behind the stammer seemed to be listening to the class rather than teaching it. Something behind the stammer was specifically interested in Harry. It didn't move overtly. It was careful, which told Harry the something was intelligent, whatever else it was. But twice in the lesson, Quirrell's eyes tracked to Harry and stayed for a half-second too long before moving away, and both times Harry felt a brief pressure at his scar, not pain exactly, more like proximity, like standing next to an open frequency. After class, Quirrell asked Harry to stay behind. Harry stayed, and Ron and Hermione exchanged a look and waited in the corridor, which he appreciated. Quirrell tidied papers with hands that shook, genuinely shook, the way hands shake when someone is frightened of themselves, and then turned to Harry with his eyes down. Potter, he said. I just wanted to say the headmaster mentioned that I'd been abroad, Harry said pleasantly. Yes. I wondered if during your time abroad you encountered any study of the dark arts. I did, Harry said. Asgard has a thorough tradition, Loki particularly. Quirrell's head came up. The eyes that looked at Harry in that moment were not Quirrell's, not entirely. There was something behind them, looking through them, and the pressure at Harry's scar spiked briefly. Loki, said a voice that was not Quirrell's stammer, smooth, cold, interested. He's well, Harry said. Sends his regards. Well, he doesn't, but I could pass them along if you like. A long silence. The other eyes, studied him with an intelligence that Harry recognized, the same quality as Odin's survey in the junkyard. Looking for worth, looking for weakness, looking for something to use. The difference was that Odin's look had found worth and been genuinely moved by it, and this look found worth and filed it as a threat assessment. You know what I am, the voice said. I have a theory, Harry said, a fairly confident one, and you are not afraid. No, Harry said, should I be? The presence behind Quirrell's eyes contracted slightly, a withdrawal, a recalibration, the motion of something intelligent adapting to unexpected data. You are a child, it said. I'm a child who lifted Mjolnir, Harry said. If you've been keeping up with wizarding news from inside a professor's head, you know that already. Quiet. We will speak again, the voice said, and then Quirrell was blinking and stammering and apologizing for keeping Harry behind, and the pressure at Harry's scar went to nothing. Harry said it was quite all right and walked out into the corridor where Ron and Hermione were waiting. What happened? Hermione said immediately. You were in there for 3 minutes. Quirrell wanted to discuss my previous education, Harry said. For 3 minutes, Ron said. He stammers, Harry said. It slows things down. Ron accepted this. Hermione looked at Harry for a moment with the expression she wore when she suspected she was being given a true but incomplete answer, which was one of the more interesting things about her. She had excellent instincts, just not yet the context to fully deploy them. I'm going to the library, Harry said. Either of you want to come? The thing he was looking for wasn't in the main library. He found it in the restricted section, not by breaking in, because he didn't need to, because Madame Pince, sharp-eyed, territorial about her books, immediately and permanently won over by Harry's evident and genuine reverence for the library's contents, had given him a general access note on the 3rd day, saying she'd never seen a first year with such a purposeful relationship to the catalog. The book was called Parasitic Dark Magic and Hosted Consciousness, and it was exactly what it sounded like. Harry read the relevant sections at a corner table with Hedwig perched on his shoulder. Madame Pince had made an exception. Hedwig had conducted herself with appropriate dignity throughout, and built his picture of what was sitting in Quirrell's head. Partial possession, dependent on proximity to host, weakening over time without a body, hence the urgency. Needed something to reconstitute, hence the stone Hagrid had retrieved from the Gringotts vault, hence the thing currently sitting somewhere in Hogwarts under presumably considerable guard, the Philosopher's Stone. He'd found the reference through 3 cross-indexed research chains and confirmed it against Nicholas Flamel's name in a footnote of Dumbledore's published alchemical work. He showed Hermione his notes. She stared at them. You've been researching this since the train. Since Diagon Alley, actually, Harry said. Quirrell's smell in the leaky cauldron. You smelled him, Ron said from across the table. Asgardian training includes sensory awareness, Harry said. And Frigga taught me several detection methodologies for Harry, Hermione said. You know the Philosopher's Stone is in the school. Yes, and Voldemort, or what's left of him, wants it. Yes. And Dumbledore presumably knows this, she said, and has taken steps. He knows, Harry said. Whether his steps are sufficient is the question. He closed the book. I've been trying to decide how much to let Dumbledore manage and how much to manage myself. Shouldn't you tell him, Ron said. That you know. He already knows I know, Harry said. Or he suspects strongly enough that it amounts to the same thing. The question is what he expects me to do about it, and whether I should do the thing he expects or the thing that's actually right. Ron and Hermione exchanged a look. Those are different things, Ron said carefully. Often, Harry said. Dumbledore requested his meeting on a Friday, 3 weeks into term. The office was circular and full of silver instruments and portraits of previous headmasters, and a phoenix named Fawkes who looked at Harry with an attention that wasn't unlike Hedwig's, certain, undeceived, interested. Harry looked back at Fawkes, and Fawkes ruffled his feathers slightly, which Harry took as a greeting. Dumbledore sat behind his desk with an expression of perfect benevolent wisdom and offered Harry a sherbet lemon. Harry sat down, declined the sweet, and waited. I have been looking forward to meeting you properly, Harry, Dumbledore said. His voice was the warm, layered baritone of someone who had spent decades choosing their words with great care and had become so practiced at it that the care was invisible. I hope the first weeks of term have been settling. Very much, Harry said. Hogwarts is extraordinary. My parents were right to love it. Dumbledore's expression warmed in a way that was genuine. Underneath the performance, something real. They were remarkable people, he said. Your father particularly had a quality that the people around him became better for. You knew them well, Harry said. I did, he paused. And I have thought about you, Harry, since you were very small. Since the night everything changed. He looked at Harry across the desk with eyes that were bright and blue and very, very intelligent. I had hoped that wherever you were safe, and I am told you were more than safe. I was loved, Harry said, which is different. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment. Something moved through the bright eyes, complex, quick, possibly emotion. Yes, he said quietly. Yes, it is rather. He settled back. I confess I had expected well. I had hoped to ease you into the wizarding world gradually, to help you understand your place in it, the significance of what you survived, the prophecy, Harry said. A pause, very small. You know about it. I've known since I was 9, Harry said. Odin told me. He sees a great deal from the high seat. Dumbledore looked at him steadily. And how do you feel about it? I think, Harry said, that prophecies are useful the way maps are useful. They tell you about terrain, not about the best path through it. Voldemort chose to act on the prophecy, and that choice started this whole chain. My choices going forward don't have to be constrained by his. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. That is a very considered position, he said. I've had time to consider it, Harry said. He looked around the office, the instruments, the portraits watching with varying degrees of interest, Fawkes on his perch. Professor Dumbledore, I know about the stone. He let it land without cushioning. Dumbledore's expression didn't shift. He was extremely good, but something in the air of the room changed. A slight atmospheric recalibration, like a weather system encountering an unexpected variable. Do you, Dumbledore said. I know it's in the school. I know why. I know what's in Professor Quirrell's head and what it needs and how urgent that need is becoming. Harry kept his voice even. I'm not telling you this to destabilize your plans. I'm telling you because I think plans built around a version of me that doesn't exist should probably be rebuilt around the version that does. A long, genuine silence. Fawkes made a low, musical sound. You are, Dumbledore said finally, not what I expected, Harry. No, Harry agreed. What did you expect? Dumbledore seemed to consider whether to answer honestly, and then, with the expression of a man who has recognized he is in a conversation where games will not work, chose honesty. I expected a boy, he said, resilient, as children who have survived what you survived tend to be, brave because that is in your nature, but shaped by the experience in ways that would make you careful, uncertain, in need of guidance. I did need guidance, Harry said. I got it from Frigga and Odin and Thor. He paused. And from you in a way, the books you wrote are very good. Something moved across Dumbledore's face that was possibly amusement and possibly something more complicated. What do you intend to do? Dumbledore asked. Be a student, Harry said. Pay attention. When the situation with the stone moves toward resolution, resolve it. He met Dumbledore's eyes. I'm not going to hide in a dormitory while something dark moves through your school, Professor. It's not in my nature. But I'm also not going to be reckless about it. And if I asked you to let the situation develop, to trust that I have it in hand, I would trust you have it largely in hand, Harry said, and I would continue paying attention anyway. He smiled, because that's what I'd do regardless. Dumbledore looked at him for a long time with those bright, ancient, intelligent eyes. Your mother, he said, would have said almost exactly the same thing. Harry filed that away, warm, private, something to be looked at later. Am I dismissed? He said. Yes, Dumbledore said, and then, Harry. The things I may ask of you, this year and in years to come, I want you to know that they come from a genuine care for this world and the people in it, even when they look like something else. I know, Harry said, and I want you to know the same is true of me. He stood, even when it looks like something else. He left the office and descended the spiral staircase, and Loki's ring was warm on his hand where it had been since the conversation started. The weeks that followed were the most purely alive Harry had felt since his best days in Asgard. Hogwarts operated on a rhythm that suited him, the structured hours with their demanding variety, the evenings in the common room where the fire was warm and the chessboards were always in use, and Hermione could be found at the corner table, with 4 books open simultaneously. He loved the castle's unreasonable geography, the staircases that changed direction, and the classrooms that appeared where they hadn't been, and the particular democracy of a space that had been genuinely surprising for 1,000 years and hadn't gotten bored of it. He played Quidditch. Oliver Wood spotted him watching a practice and asked if he'd flown before, and Harry said not on a broom specifically, and Wood handed him a Nimbus 2000 with the authority of a man who had already decided, and Harry was in the air within 60 seconds and had caught the practice snitch within 4 minutes, and Wood's face was the expression of a man who has met his answer to a problem he'd been having for years. Harry became Gryffindor's seeker. Ron, who knew every Quidditch statistic in current professional memory, treated this as a personal vindication. He tutored Neville in herbology, which Neville was quietly excellent at, and only didn't know it because nobody had ever framed his excellence as anything other than the absence of failure in other subjects. Neville responded to being told he was good at something by being better at it, which Harry found quietly wonderful. He argued with Snape every potions lesson in the way that arguments happen when two equally stubborn parties are too professional to be openly rude and too honest to pretend they like each other. Snape was brilliant at potions. He was also a deeply damaged man who saw James Potter when he looked at Harry and was making only partial progress at separating the two, and Harry found it too sad to take personally. He said so to Ron once, who stared at him. "Snape is sad to you. Complicated people are often sad underneath," Harry said. "It doesn't mean they get to behave badly, but understanding why helps. He gives you a hard time constantly." "He gives everyone a hard time," Harry said. "He gives me a specifically personal hard time, which is almost flattering." And through all of it, the classes, the Quidditch, the library sessions, and the chess and the late evenings in the common room, Harry felt the warmth of Mjolnir against his chest where it hung on its cord, and felt it pulse sometimes, gently, like a heartbeat that wasn't his, reminding him without words that it was there. He was not afraid of what was coming. He was, if anything, curious. He touched Loki's ring on his hand sometimes in the evenings, in the quiet, and thought about the palace roof and the amber sea and stars too close to be real. He wrote in Frigga's journal, "I know who I am now in a way I didn't even in Asgard. Because here I am surrounded by people who have a story about me that isn't true, and I have to choose every day to be the true version instead. That's harder than sparring with Thor. It's also better practice." Chapter 4. The Sorting Hat's Dilemma. The first Quidditch match of the season was Gryffindor versus Slytherin, and it was raining, not the gentle English rain that people romanticized in retrospect. This was the committed, personal kind, horizontal in places, cold enough to have opinions, and it had started 20 minutes before kickoff and showed no signs of reconsidering. The stands were a sea of umbrellas and warming charms and students who had decided that team loyalty outweighed basic survival instincts. Harry was in the air before the rain registered. He'd found, early in his first week of Quidditch practice, that flying was the closest thing to Asgardian combat that wizarding sport offered, not in terms of violence, but in terms of the particular mental state required: total presence. Nothing existing outside the immediate moment and its demands. He'd been good at that state since he was 9 years old, and Thor had first taught him that thought about fear and actual fear were two different species, and only one of them happened in the body. The Slytherin seeker was Terrence Higgs, a 6th year with 3 years of match experience and the expression of someone who had looked at Harry's age and decided this would be easy. Harry had noted the expression during warm-ups and filed it under people who underestimate things they haven't measured. Madam Hooch's whistle cut the rain. The game opened with the controlled chaos that Quidditch always was: 14 players, 6 balls of varying intentions, and several hundred people in the stands with very loud feelings about the outcome. Harry climbed immediately, above the main scrum, into the gray ceiling of the rain where visibility dropped to 30 feet in any direction, and the noise from the ground became abstracted, distant. He hunted by pattern rather than sight. The snitch was golden and small and fast, but it was also, he had noticed in practice, not random. It moved in curves, not angles. It preferred the edges of the playing field's altitude range. It almost never crossed the center line in the first 10 minutes of a match, as if it too needed time to warm up. He found it 17 minutes in. A flash of gold below him, heading left, moving fast but not full speed, testing, the way his opponents did in the early rounds of a spar. Harry went vertical to gain speed, then dropped. Higgs saw him drop and followed, reacting rather than reading, which was the difference. Harry wasn't going where Higgs was going. Harry was going where the snitch was going to be. He pulled out of the dive at 8 feet above the ground, hand extended, and the snitch walked into his palm like it had been waiting for him. The stands went, by several accounts, briefly insane. Ron, watching from the front row with his brothers, made a sound Fred later described as technically words but not in any known language. Hermione, who had been keeping precise statistical notes, stood up so fast she knocked over her ink pot. Harry landed, opened his hand to show Madame Hooch, and looked up at the stands where the gold and red section was doing extraordinary things. In the Slytherin stands, Draco Malfoy was standing very still. Harry met his eyes across the distance. Draco's expression was the one Harry had catalogued from Diagon Alley, complicated, layered, not quite what it was performing to be. He held Harry's gaze for 3 seconds and then looked away, which was interesting. Not anger, something that in someone with fewer defenses would have looked like genuine respect. The locker room afterward was noise and warmth, and Oliver Wood talking about tactical brilliance with the fervent specificity of someone who'd found religion, and Harry changed and listened and let the warmth happen around him. Ron and Hermione were waiting outside. 17 minutes, Hermione said, immediately. The record for a first year is 23 minutes, and that was 1956. You've broken it by 6 minutes in your first competitive match against a sixth-year seeker who... She's been calculating since you caught it, Ron said. I could see you from the stands, Hermione continued, slightly louder. You weren't just faster than him, you went somewhere different. You didn't chase the snitch where he was chasing it, you went where it was going, Harry said. Yes, how did you know? Pattern recognition, Harry said. Thor taught me that the most important thing in a fight isn't where the opponent is. It's where they're going to be in 3 seconds. Hermione wrote this down. Ron watched her write it down with the expression of someone who had accepted that this was simply how Hermione processed the world and found it, in its way, endearing. Malfoy looked proper furious, Ron said. He didn't look furious, Harry said. Ron frowned. He was staring at you, impressed, Harry said. They look similar from a distance. Ron considered this. I don't think Malfoy gets impressed. Everyone gets impressed by things, Harry said. They just choose what to do about it differently. They walked back to the castle through rain that had gentled to the apologetic kind, and Harry turned the match over in his mind, not the flying, but the stands. The watching faces, because something else had caught his attention during the final dive, and he was still pulling it apart. Quirrell had been in the stands. And for the 4 seconds of Harry's terminal dive toward the snitch, the other eyes behind Quirrell's eyes had been completely, entirely, unguardedly focused on Harry, not with interest, with something that Harry, with 4 years of Loki's tutoring in the reading of complicated minds, identified as hunger. He touched the hammer at his chest. Later, he thought, the incident with the troll happened on Halloween. Not the way it might have, not the stumbling, accidental encounter in a darkened corridor of the original timeline, whatever that would have been. Dumbledore's school had a troll in its dungeons on All Hallows' Eve because Quirrell had let it in, and Harry had known since mid-October that Quirrell was looking for an opportunity. He'd told Ron and Hermione everything, 2 weeks earlier, on a Sunday afternoon in the library, when Madame Pince was reorganizing the genealogy section, and they had a corner entirely to themselves. Hermione had spent 20 minutes being very precise about the implications, and cross-referencing them against everything she'd read about Voldemort. Ron had spent the same 20 minutes listening to Hermione with increasing and genuine alarm, which he handled by becoming very focused and practical. So what do we do? Ron had said when they'd both finished. We wait, Harry said, and we watch and we're ready. Ready for what specifically? For whatever he tries, Harry said. I think there will be a diversion. He needs a diversion to get to the stone, and he needs to move before his host body deteriorates further. He looked at them both. If something happens and you're in danger, you get out. That's not negotiable. We're not, Ron started. I'm not saying you can't handle yourselves, Harry said. I'm saying that if something is specifically coming for me, having you in the middle of it gives it leverage it doesn't otherwise have. He looked at Ron, then Hermione. You're not leverage unless you put yourself there. A pause. That's annoyingly reasonable, Ron said. That's very annoying, Hermione agreed, and then looked at Harry with the expression she wore when she was about to be honest in a way she hadn't prepared. You've thought about this more than you've told us. Yes, Harry said. How long? Since the train, Harry said. Largely. Hermione looked at him for a moment. We're in this, she said firmly. Not as leverage, as people who have decided to be in it. Harry looked at her, then at Ron, who was nodding with the particular solidity of someone who has made up his mind and is at peace with it. All right, Harry said. Good, Hermione said, and went back to her notes. Halloween started normally and turned on its head at 7:15 in the evening. They were in the middle of the Halloween feast, which was genuinely impressive, the great hall's ceiling full of floating candles and live bats, the tables covered in dishes that had no business being as good as they were, when Quirrell ran in. Harry watched him enter before anyone else noticed him, because he'd been watching the door. Quirrell stumbled to Dumbledore's chair with his turban askew and his face doing an extremely convincing impression of panic, and said in his stammering voice that there was a troll in the dungeon, thought you ought to know, and then fainted. The feast hall erupted. Prefects were deployed. Students were directed to dormitories. Teachers moved with purpose. And in the controlled chaos of 500 students trying to move in 6 directions at once, Quirrell recovered from his faint and moved against the flow, not toward the dungeon, away from it, toward the 3rd floor, where the trapdoor was. Harry was 3 steps behind him. He'd been ready to move the moment Quirrell entered the hall. He'd told Ron, if I get up suddenly and go somewhere, get Hermione and go straight to McGonagall. Ron had been parsing this instruction for 3 weeks, and when the moment came, he was already turning to Hermione before Harry had left the bench. The corridor emptied fast. Harry followed Quirrell at a distance, through the 2nd floor and up the staircase to the 3rd floor corridor, the one with the locked door, the one Dumbledore had very specifically mentioned in the start-of-term speech, with the particular tone of someone making sure you knew where not to go and why. Quirrell's wand was out. The lock on the door opened smoothly, no hesitation, which confirmed that this was not his first visit. Harry reached up and took Mjolnir from the cord at his chest. The hammer expanded in his hand with a warmth that was immediate and familiar, solid and real, and he stepped into the corridor. Quirrell was already through the door when Harry reached it. He followed. The room beyond the door had a trapdoor in the floor and a dog in front of it that was approximately the size of a small house, with 3 heads, all of which turned to look at Harry at the same moment, with the synchronized attention of something that had been waiting for something to eat. Harry stopped. The dog, Fluffy, he'd heard Hagrid mention the name with the affectionate confidence of someone who'd named something, and decided the name settled the matter, had all 3 of its heads focused on him now, which meant its 3 pairs of eyes were off Quirrell, who had frozen 10 feet ahead. Harry looked at the 3 heads, and the 3 heads looked at Harry and Mjolnir. The hammer was humming. Low, steady, not aggressive, more like a note held in the air. One of Fluffy's heads tilted, slightly, in the way that dogs tilt their heads when they hear something interesting. Then the 2nd head tilted. The 3rd stayed where it was, but its ears went from forward to sideways, which in dog body language Harry had learned was a move away from aggression. You're protecting something important, Harry said. Fluffy's first head made a sound that was not quite a bark and not quite a whine. I know, Harry said. I'm not going to take it. I just need to know what's below this trapdoor that he gestured toward Quirrell, trying to get to. Quirrell had recovered from his surprise and was staring at Harry with an expression that was split between his own fear and something behind him that was very cold and very calculating. Potter, the smooth voice said, through Quirrell's mouth. Not now, Harry said, still looking at Fluffy. You will move aside, the voice said. I won't, Harry said pleasantly. Actually, I'd like you to explain something to me. If you get the stone, I will be restored, the voice said, and the word had an edge that was all the years of diminishment and desperation packed into a single syllable. And then, Harry said, and then I will take what is mine. Which is everything, the voice said. Harry nodded slowly. Fluffy had settled, the first 2 heads were still watching him, but the energy had changed, less imminent, more interested. Here's the thing about everything, Harry said. It's a concept that doesn't survive contact with specifics. What specifically do you want? Power, you had power. Immortality, the stone might give you that. Territory, followers, what is the shape of it? The actual shape, not the word. A pause. You are stalling, the voice said. I'm genuinely asking, Harry said. He turned, finally, to face Quirrell fully. The eyes behind the stammer had the fixed, cold quality of a consciousness backed into a corner it had been backing into for a decade. And underneath the cold, underneath the control, Harry saw it clearly, because Frigga had taught him to see clearly, was something that had been frightened for a very long time and had built its entire existence around refusing to be. You're afraid of dying, Harry said, not cruelly, just as a fact. The silence that followed was the longest one of the encounter. I am beyond fear, the voice said. You split your soul into pieces, Harry said, multiple times, because the alternative was death. That's not beyond fear. That's the longest possible response to it. He kept his voice even, not judgmental, just honest. I'm not saying that makes you sympathetic. I'm saying that knowing what drives you makes it harder for you to pretend I don't understand the stakes. Quirrell's wand arm came up. Harry didn't move. Stupefy, Quirrell said, and the red bolt crossed the distance between them, and Harry raised Mjolnir and the bolt struck the hammer's head and detonated into sparks that scattered off the stone walls in every direction. Fluffy lurched backward from the sparks. The trapdoor shuddered. Quirrell fired again, twice, rapidly, not stunners now, something darker and faster, and Harry sidestepped the first with a movement that was more instinct than calculation, and deflected the second with a turn of the hammer that sent it into the ceiling, where it blew a chunk of stone loose. Harry crossed the distance between them in 3 steps. He put his left hand on Quirrell's wand arm, not the right, not the hammer, and Quirrell seized, not from Harry's grip, but from the touch itself. The skin contact, like something was burning. Harry hadn't expected that. He released Quirrell's arm and stepped back. Quirrell stumbled, gasping, clutching the arm where Harry had touched him. The sleeve had burned away at the contact point. The voice behind the eyes was screaming, not in language, just in the raw frequency of something in pain. Harry stood back and watched. He hadn't done anything specifically. The touch had just been a touch. Later, he would understand. You are Asgard's champion, Frigga would explain. You carry the light of their realm in you, whether you intend to or not. Light that old and that concentrated is actively hostile to things built from dark violation. But in the moment, in the chamber, Harry just watched Quirrell struggle with the agony of the contact, and the thing behind him fighting for control. "Stop," Harry said. Quirrell looked at him with 2 kinds of eyes, his own, terrified and desperate, and behind them the other, furious and fading. "Let him go," Harry said, to the voice, not to Quirrell. "Whatever you've done to him, let him go. The stone isn't accessible to you tonight. I'm standing between it and you, and we can do this the hard way for as long as you like, but the outcome will be the same." He held Quirrell's gaze. "Or you leave his head, and he gets the help he probably desperately needs, and you go. Somewhere regroup, make a different plan. You would let me go," the voice said, disbelieving. "I'd rather deal with you when you have a body," Harry said honestly. "Because when you have a body, you can make actual choices instead of operating entirely from desperation. Desperate things are unpredictable. They're also," he paused, "pitiable, and I'd prefer to take you seriously." The silence stretched, then Quirrell collapsed. He hit the floor hard, and Harry was there before Quirrell's head could crack against the stone. He caught him, one hand, awkward and quick, and lowered him. The turban had come unwound in the fall, and what was underneath it was, Harry looked. A face on the back of a head, white, flat, barely a face at all. Eyes closed now, the presence withdrawn, fled. He could feel it going like a temperature drop. The absence of whatever oppressive weight the fragment of Voldemort's soul had been radiating. He pulled Quirrell's head up off the floor with careful, practical hands, and Quirrell was unconscious but breathing. Harry sat back on his heels and looked at the room, at Fluffy, who was watching from the far side with 6 eyes and no aggression, at the trapdoor, at the unconscious professor and the empty-feeling turban. He heard footsteps in the corridor. McGonagall came through the door first, wand lit, expression set at the particular angle of someone who has processed an emergency at high speed and arrived expecting the worst. She stopped when she saw Harry sitting on the floor next to Quirrell. Dumbledore was 2 steps behind her. The headmaster took in the room with a single survey: Harry, Quirrell, the trapdoor, Fluffy, who chose this moment to yawn with all 3 mouths simultaneously. His eyes came to rest on Harry. "He tried to access the stone," Harry said. "Voldemort was using him as a vessel. He's gone for now, the fragment, I mean. Quirrell needs medical attention." He stood, brushing stone dust off his knees. "I got here before he reached the trapdoor." McGonagall made a sound that was professionally restrained emotion. "Are you hurt?" Dumbledore said. "No," Harry said, "though I think I should tell you the touch thing." He looked at his left hand. "Contact with me hurts whatever Voldemort's essence has become. I don't know why, Frigga might." Dumbledore looked at his hand, and then at Harry, and for one unguarded moment, the headmaster's carefully curated expression dropped entirely, and what was underneath it was something that Harry recognized, distantly, as the specific look of a person reckoning with facts they haven't finished understanding. "We should talk," Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry agreed, "but in the morning, please. I'd like to tell my friends I'm all right before they worry themselves past useful." McGonagall made the restrained emotion sound again. Dumbledore looked at Harry and something in his expression shifted, not his wisdom, not his authority, but the calculation behind it, that careful chessmaster positioning. And for a moment, he was just an old man looking at a child who had done something remarkable and choosing to simply acknowledge that. In the morning, Dumbledore agreed. Harry walked past both of them into the corridor. Ron was at the entrance to the 3rd-floor corridor when Harry got there, which meant he had absolutely not done what Harry had asked and gone to McGonagall, and instead had followed at a careful distance with Hermione, both of them stationed at the outer door with the focused expressions of people who have made their peace with the decision they've made. Harry looked at them. "McGonagall is inside," he said. "Don't let her see you." They moved. By the time they reached the common room, it was late and mostly empty. Halloween had driven the party stragglers to bed, and they sat by the dying fire and Harry told them what had happened. All of it, from Quirrell to the trapdoor to the touch to the conversation with Dumbledore. Ron stared at him for the length of most of the account. Hermione had her notebook out by the third sentence but put it down by the eighth, which Harry recognized as her version of being too engaged to process linearly. He ran, Ron said. The Voldemort fragment just ran. He retreated, Harry said. Different thing. Running is panicked. He made a calculation. What calculation? Hermione said. That tonight was not going to work, and that, possibly, fighting me directly while he's in that state isn't in his interest. Harry looked at the fire. He'll come back. Not through Quirrell, not in the same way, but he'll be back. He paused. He's very persistent, I'll say that for him. You said it hurt him, Hermione said carefully. The touch. Yes, you don't know why. I have theories, Harry said. Frigga will know for certain. I'm going to write to her. Write to, Ron blinked. You're going to write to the Queen of Asgard about the magical properties of your skin. She'll find it interesting, Harry said. She finds everything interesting. It's one of the best things about her. Hermione looked at him with the expression he'd learned to read, as I want to ask something personal, and I'm deciding whether it's appropriate. He waited. Do you miss them? She said. Asgard, your family there. Yes, Harry said, not dramatically, just true. Every day, in the way you miss something that hasn't gone anywhere but is far away. He looked at the fire. But this, he gestured vaguely, meaning the castle, the common room, the fire, them. This is also something. Ron was quiet for a moment. Then he said, with the extremely studied casualness that he deployed when saying things he actually meant very much, well, you know. We're glad you're here. We're very glad, Hermione said, and she said it straightforwardly, no hedging, which was its own kind of rare. Harry looked at both of them. Frigga had told him when he was 10 that belonging somewhere was not a feeling, it was a pattern. A repeated sequence of moments where you were chosen, specifically, by people who had other options. He'd asked her what belonging in Asgard felt like, and she'd held his face in her hands and said like this. He understood it now in a new way. Likewise, Harry said. They sat by the fire until it burned down to coals, and nobody went to bed until the coals had gone gray. The morning meeting with Dumbledore was different from the first one. The headmaster still had his instruments, his portraits, his phoenix. But the calibration was different, the performance still present, the wisdom still real, but the positioning between them had shifted. Like two people who have been circling each other politely and have decided to close the distance. The stone will be moved, Dumbledore said. Nicholas Flamel has been informed. He will destroy it. Harry said nothing. You disagree? Dumbledore said. I think it's the right call, Harry said. Flamel has lived long enough to make that choice with full understanding. He paused. I was thinking about Quirrell. He is in the hospital wing, Dumbledore said. What remains of him? What will happen to him? There are questions to answer, Dumbledore said carefully. He made choices, some under duress and some not. He was a man with a dark thing living in his head for close to a year, Harry said. I'd be careful about how clearly that looks like free will. Dumbledore looked at him. You have strong views about culpability. Frigga taught me that the hardest thing about justice is that it requires you to fully understand a person before you decide what they deserve, Harry said. Most systems skip the understanding part because it's slow and uncomfortable. A pause. You are, Dumbledore said, an unusual child. You keep saying that, Harry said. I think what you mean is that I'm a child who doesn't fit the plan. The plan, Dumbledore said carefully, has always been about ensuring Voldemort's defeat, ensuring the world's survival, protecting people who cannot protect themselves. I know, Harry said. Those are good goals. I'm not disputing the goals. He met Dumbledore's eyes. I'm saying that the plan, as you've built it, assumed a Harry Potter who needed protecting and managing, and I'd like to propose an alternative. He leaned forward slightly. Work with me, not around me, not through me. With me, tell me what you know, I'll tell you what I know, and we make better decisions together than either of us makes alone. Dumbledore was quiet for a long moment. Fox trilled softly. You realize, Dumbledore said slowly, that what you're describing is asking me to trust an 11-year-old with information that most adults in this world don't have access to. Yes, Harry said, and you're asking me to trust a plan I don't have access to. He shrugged. One of us has to go first. Another long silence. The prophecy in full, Dumbledore said and began to recite it. Harry listened. He'd known most of it. The last line, the part Odin hadn't told him, and either must die at the hand of the other for neither can live while the other survives, landed with the quiet weight of something that was not a surprise and was still heavy. He sat with it. All right, Harry said. All right, Dumbledore said. It's not news that this ends with a confrontation, Harry said. The shape of it is clarifying, useful to know. He looked at Dumbledore. Does knowing it change what you think I should do? It changes what I think you will have to do, Dumbledore said carefully. Eventually, Harry agreed. There's a great deal of time between now and eventually, and I intend to spend it becoming as prepared as possible. He stood. Thank you for telling me, Harry, Dumbledore said, and the headmaster's voice had lost its performance entirely, and what was underneath it was just an old man. I am sorry for the weight of it. Harry stopped at the door, turned. Don't be sorry, he said. Just be honest with me, that's worth more. Dumbledore nodded. And Harry thought, watching the bright eyes and the white beard and the particular tiredness of a man who has been carrying enormous things for a very long time, that the headmaster was possibly, for the first time in many years, genuinely uncertain about what came next. Harry found that, on balance, encouraging. Draco found him after dinner 3 days later. Not dramatically, no confrontation, no audience, no performance. Harry was walking back from the Quidditch pitch alone after an extra practice session, and Draco fell into step beside him on the grounds path in the early December dark, as if this was something they did regularly. Your catch in the Hufflepuff match, Draco said. The one where you fainted left. What about it? Harry said. Higgs analyzed it at the Slytherin table for an hour, Draco said. He couldn't work out how you knew the snitch was going right. Pattern recognition, Harry said. Same as the first match. You do that a lot, Draco said. Patterns, don't you? Draco was quiet for a moment. My father says that the key to power is knowing what people want and controlling their access to it. That's a strategy, Harry said. Not the same as pattern recognition. What's the difference? Your father's strategy treats people as predictable, Harry said. Pattern recognition just means paying attention to what's actually happening rather than what you expect. He glanced at Draco sideways. They look similar, but they're not. One of them gets surprised more often. Draco walked in silence for several steps. You didn't take the credit, Draco said. After Halloween, there were rumors, students who heard something on the third-floor corridor. You could have. I don't need credit, Harry said. Everyone needs credit, Draco said. People who were told they were worthless when they were young tend to need credit, Harry said. People who were taught they had worth regardless of performance tend to need it less. He paused. Which category are you? Draco stopped walking. Harry stopped with him. They stood in the December dark on the grounds path, and Draco's face in the castle light was doing something complicated, something that was not the Malfoy mask he wore everywhere and was not the boy underneath it either, but the transitional space between the two. My father, Draco said and stopped, is a man who learned to love conditionally, Harry said. It's not unusual. It's not even particularly his fault, probably. But it's a thing that gets passed down. You don't know my father, Draco said, and the sharpness in it was defensive more than angry. No, Harry said. But I know what conditional love looks like on the person who grows up inside it. He looked at Draco steadily. You don't have to agree with me. I'm just saying, whatever you think you have to perform to be worth something, in Slytherin or at home or anywhere, you were worth something before you started performing. Draco looked at him for a long moment. The complicated expression moved through several things that Harry gave him the privacy of not cataloging. That's a very strange thing to say to someone, Draco said finally. Probably, Harry said. I had an unusual education. He started walking again. After 2 steps, Draco fell back into step beside him. They walked the rest of the path to the castle in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than most of the silences between them. Less negotiation, more just coexistence. At the entrance hall they separated without ceremony, Draco toward the Slytherin stairs and Harry toward Gryffindor Tower. At the divide, Draco said without turning, the snitch actually does have a pattern. Yes, Harry said. You knew I'd work it out. I thought you might, Harry said. You're observant. When you're not performing, a pause. Same to you, Draco said, which was either an insult or its exact opposite, and Harry decided it was the latter. December arrived like a complete change in the weather, which it technically was. The castle dressed in frost, the lake solidified at the edges, the grounds white enough that Quidditch was suspended, and Neville Longbottom, who hated flying with a conviction that Harry found entirely understandable and never condescending about, visibly relaxed. Most students went home for Christmas. The castle emptied to a pleasant skeleton of people and firelight. Harry went to Asgard. He stepped off the Hogwarts Express at King's Cross and stood on the platform until the crowd thinned, and then walked to the park in Hyde Park and stood on the specific piece of pavement and looked up. The Bifrost came down. He was home in 14 seconds. Chapter 5. The Mirror and the Stone. Christmas in Asgard lasted 5 days and contained more food than Harry had consumed in any equivalent period of his life, which was saying something given how much Thor ate. Thor had made him spar on Christmas morning before breakfast, because Thor's relationship with celebration was inseparable from his relationship with combat. Joy for Thor had a physical expression, or it wasn't entirely real. Harry had obliged, and they'd gone for 40 minutes in the frost-dusted training yard, under a sky that was doing something extraordinary with its colors. And Harry had lasted longer than he ever had, and done something at the 30-minute mark that he hadn't planned and hadn't entirely understood. He'd redirected a blow from Thor's hammer into the ground, and the resulting shockwave had cracked the training yard's stone floor in a radius of 6 feet. Both of them had looked at the crack and then at each other. "You didn't know you could do that," Thor said. "No," Harry said. Thor grinned. "Magnificent." Frigga's response to Harry's letter about the touch-burning effect had arrived 2 days before Christmas, 14 pages of Asgardian script in her careful, precise handwriting. The summary, reduced to its essentials. Harry carried something that dark magic built from violation of the natural order could not coexist with. Not because Harry was purely good in some abstract sense. Frigga was careful about that, because she was careful about most things, but because his mother's sacrificial magic, combined with 4 years of Asgard's particular life energy that he'd absorbed during training, had made him constitutionally hostile to the kind of fragmented, desperate dark essence Voldemort's soul piece represented. Think of it less as weapon, she'd written, and more as incompatibility. Oil and water do not fight. They simply cannot occupy the same space. Harry read this 3 times and then wrote back, "What happens when the rest of the soul fragments are collected? Is the incompatibility cumulative?" Her answer arrived on Christmas Eve. "I don't know. Neither does Odin. That is notable in itself. There are very few things Odin does not know, and the things he doesn't tend to be things the universe has not yet decided. He brought this to the Christmas dinner table and told Odin directly, because he'd learned that Odin received information best when it was delivered without ceremony. Odin had been quiet for a longer moment than usual. Then, your mother was a woman of exceptional magical depth. What she did for you was not simply love. Love without magical power does not leave the kind of mark you carry. What kind of mark does it leave? Harry said. The kind that doesn't fade, Odin said. The kind that accumulates. Thor, from across the enormous table, had been following this with the focused expression he reserved for strategy discussions. So the more fragments Voldemort reconstitutes, the more coherent he becomes, Harry said. And the more coherent he becomes, the more he might be able to resist the incompatibility. He looked at Odin. Or the worse the reaction when they're in the same space. Both, Loki said, from the far end of the table where he had been apparently reading and actually listening. The answer is both. Complete coherence and incomplete coherence are entirely different problems. Then the fragments, Harry said. I need to know about the fragments. Odin met his eyes. That is a longer conversation. Yes, Harry said. I'll come back in summer. You will come back in summer regardless, Frigga said, and her tone closed that particular subject with the gentle finality of someone who is not making a request. The other thing that happened in Asgard at Christmas was not scheduled. Harry was alone in the library on the 4th evening. Everyone else was at some court entertainment that he'd attended the first 2 hours of before excusing himself, because 4 months at Hogwarts had recalibrated his tolerance for large gatherings when Loki appeared in the armchair opposite him. Not walked in, appeared. One moment the chair was empty, the next it wasn't. Don't do that, Harry said without looking up from his book. You heard me arrive, Loki said, sounding pleased. I heard the air change, Harry said. You've been getting better at the silent part, but you haven't solved the air displacement issue yet. I'll note that for next time, Loki said. He crossed his legs and looked at Harry with the expression that meant he'd come to say something and was deciding how to begin. Harry waited. You dealt with Voldemort's fragment, Loki said. I told you about that. You told me facts about it. I'm asking about the experience of it. He tilted his head. You talked to it for quite some time by your account. Yes. Why? Harry set his book down and thought about this honestly. Because I wanted to understand it, he said, not sympathize. Understand, there's a difference, and I think it's an important one. The thing in Quirrell's head was frightened and angry and desperate and very, very intelligent, and understanding how all 4 of those qualities combined gave me better information than just fighting it would have. And what did understanding it give you? Predictability, Harry said. It will come back, it will try again. And when it does, it will do something I haven't anticipated because it's smart enough to know that predictable approaches failed. He paused. But its core motivation is constant, and core motivations are useful anchors. Loki looked at him for a moment. Fear of death, fear of non-existence, Harry said. Specifically, it's slightly different. Death he might have made peace with. The idea of simply not continuing, that's what drove the soul-splitting. That's what drives everything. He picked his book back up. It's the kind of fear that only gets worse when you've done terrible things to avoid it, because then the possibility of facing what you've done becomes part of the non-existence you're afraid of. You've been thinking about this for a while, Loki said. Since October, Harry said. Loki was quiet. Then in the particular voice he used for things he said once and never revisited, you are going to face it properly eventually, not a fragment, the whole thing reconstituted. Yes, Harry said, and you're not afraid. I'm appropriately concerned, Harry said, which is different from afraid. Afraid makes you smaller, concern makes you careful. Loki looked at him for a long moment. Something in his expression was not soft, Loki didn't do soft, but open in a way that was adjacent to it. I taught you that, he said. You and Frigga both, Harry said. Between the two of you, I've had a very thorough education in the taxonomy of emotions. See that you use it, Loki said, and stood, and was not there, and the air in the chair settled. Harry went back to his book. January returned him to Hogwarts changed in small ways that Ron noticed immediately, and Hermione noticed within the hour, and nobody else noticed at all, which was usual. Ron searched for it over breakfast on the first morning back. Bigger, did you get bigger? Probably, Harry said. Thor's training tends to have cumulative effects. You look like you've been doing something strenuous for 2 weeks, Hermione said, with the precision of someone who has calibrated their observations. 40 minutes of combat with a god every morning, Harry said, qualifies as strenuous. Right, Ron said. He looked at Harry with the assessment that he'd developed over 4 months and that Harry appreciated for being entirely unpretentious. Ron looked at people the way he looked at Quidditch. Practically, for what they actually were rather than what they ought to be. Something happened, apart from training. Several things, Harry said. I'll tell you later. Later was that evening in the empty classroom they'd co-opted for the kind of conversations that needed space, not secrecy, just room to move around in, and Harry told them about Frigga's letter and Odin's confirmation and the soul fragments. Hermione had a different response to this than she had to most things Harry told her. She went very still, which was her version of being genuinely shocked. Then, Horcruxes. Sorry, Harry said. It's in the restricted section, she said. I found a reference in October, and I've been trying to get more information since, but the main sources are all either restricted or destroyed. But the theory, splitting a soul, anchoring the fragments in objects to prevent death, it's called a Horcrux, and it's considered the darkest magic that exists because of what you have to do to create one. What do you have to do? Ron said. Hermione's expression was complicated. Kill someone, she said. The act of murder tears the soul. You have to capture the torn piece and encase it in an object. Deliberately. The classroom was quiet. He made more than one, Harry said. Yes, Hermione said. If he was afraid of death the way you described, the specific existential kind, he would have made as many as possible, as many as he could survive making. She looked at Harry. How many pieces can a soul be split into before it can't function coherently? That's what I asked Frigga, Harry said. She didn't know. Odin didn't know. The universe hasn't decided yet was how he put it. The universe hasn't, Ron started then stopped. Right, it's Odin. We need to know how many there are, Hermione said, and where. One was in Quirrell, Harry said, or attached to him. That one's gone, dispersed when it fled, I think, though I'm not certain. He looked at his hand. The diary. There was a diary mentioned in the trial records of several Death Eaters, Lucius Malfoy specifically. Dumbledore gave testimony that it was an object of concern. Hermione stared at him. You read the Death Eater trial records. Extensively, Harry said. They're public record. The Ministry publishes them. He looked at Ron. Your father would know how to access them. Ron blinked. He might. He works for the Ministry. He looked between Harry and Hermione. Are we making a list of dark artifacts that might contain pieces of someone's soul? Yes, Harry said. Right, Ron said. He pulled out a piece of parchment. I'll need more ink. February arrived with a thaw that made the grounds muddy and Quidditch practice complicated, and Harry was in the air 3 times a week with the team and alone once a week in the early mornings, which nobody knew about and he didn't advertise. He flew alone at 6 in the morning because 6 in the morning was the time when the grounds were quiet and the sky was still deciding what color to be, and up there in the cold and the quiet, he could think in the way that bodies in motion sometimes allow better than bodies at rest. He thought about the Horcruxes. He thought about Voldemort's reconstitution timeline. The stone had been moved, destroyed by Flamel's choice, but the entity that had been in Quirrell's head was not finished. It was regrouping. Something else would happen. The soul fragment problem complicated everything, because a Voldemort who had protected himself in multiple objects was a fundamentally different tactical challenge than a Voldemort who existed only in one place. He thought about Draco Malfoy, who sat across from him in potions, and argued with him about theoretical applications of lacewing flies with the intensity of someone who had found, possibly for the first time, an opponent worth arguing with. Their arguments were increasingly divorced from malice, less point scoring, more genuine intellectual friction, the kind that happens between people who are actually interested in whether they're right. He thought about what Odin had said about the soul fragments, and Loki's quiet see that you use it, and Frigga's letter about incompatibility and accumulation. He was pulling out of a dive over the pitch's south end when he felt it, not a sound, a change the way the air felt around him, the particular atmospheric shift that Heimdall had taught him to recognize as the Bifrost's approach signature. He'd never felt it outside Asgard before. He brought his broom horizontal and looked north. The light came down in Hyde Park, visible from the air, if you were high enough, which he was, and even at this distance he could see it was not the narrow column of standard transit. It was wider, more deliberate, a party arrival. He was on the ground and running in 40 seconds. They were in the forbidden forest edge by the time he reached them. They'd come down outside the castle's wards, which was either courtesy or awareness that arriving inside the wards of a protected school might trigger defenses, and Harry suspected it was the second because the person leading the small group was Odin, and Odin was not given to courtesy when awareness was available. 4 Asgardians. Odin in his gray cloak, staff in hand, 2 of his ravens guard in full armor, which was notable because full armor was not standard transit wear, and Sif, Lady Sif, who was one of Asgard's finest warriors and had been Harry's sparring partner for 6 months of his 3rd year, when Thor had decided Harry needed to train against a different style, and Sif had agreed with the competitive enthusiasm she applied to everything. She was dark-haired, dark-eyed, and currently standing with her hand on her sword hilt, and her eyes moving over the tree line with the professional assessment of someone who has arrived at a place they don't entirely trust. Harry jogged to the tree line, breath clouding in the February cold. Odin saw him. The ravens on his shoulders both turned their heads. "You felt the Bifrost," Odin said. "From 600 feet, Harry said. "What happened?" "Nothing has happened yet," Odin said. "That is the point." He stepped closer, and Harry noted with the particular alertness that Asgardian training had built into him that Odin's single eye was not doing its usual measured survey of him. It was doing something more like checking, confirming presence. "You were worried," Harry said. "I received a communication," Odin said carefully, "from the remnant you encountered in October." Harry went still. "Voldemort communicated with you, attempted to communicate with me," Odin said, with the specific tone of a distinction that mattered, "through channels he should not have access to. Through the roots of Yggdrasil, extremely old, extremely dark magic, and the fact that he could reach those roots at all suggests he is more reconstituted than we believed." "What did he say?" Harry said. Odin looked at him. "He made a claim on you. The February morning was very quiet." "A claim," Harry said. "He stated that you carry a piece of him," Odin said, "that the night your mother died, the fragment that fled entered you when it meant to destroy you, that you are, by his definition, his." The single eye was very steady. "I am telling you this not because I believe his claim, but because I needed to see you with my own eye and confirm that what he said was not accurate in ways I had not detected." Harry processed this. He thought about Frigga's letter, incompatibility, accumulation. He thought about the scar on his forehead. He thought about the way Quirrell's fragment had looked at him with what he'd read as hunger, and reconsidered what hunger sometimes concealed, recognition. He thought about the pressure at his scar. Present, consistent, like a proximity sensor. "He's not wrong," Harry said. Odin did not react visibly. Neither did Sif. The ravens shifted. "The night his killing curse rebounded," Harry said, slowly and carefully. "The fragment that fired it shattered. Most of it fled. But if she's right about accumulation, about the body she'd made being destroyed in the rebound," he touched the scar with 2 fingers. "Some of it would have needed somewhere to go. A vessel, the nearest living thing." He looked at Odin. "Me." Sif made a very controlled sound. "You've been carrying it," Odin said, not a question. "Without knowing," Harry said. "The scar is a connection point, not just a mark but an anchor." He dropped his hand. "But it doesn't behave like the one in Quirrell. That one was active, conscious, straining. This," he pressed inward, trying to feel the edges of what was there, the way Frigga had taught him to feel the edges of magical things. "This is dormant, like it went in and the environment wasn't hospitable and it's been suspended." "Your mother's magic," Odin said. "Incompatibility," Harry said. "Like Frigga said, it's in there but it can't move, it can't act, it's essentially frozen." He lowered his hand. "When I touched Quirrell, when the active fragment reacted to contact with me, it recognized itself," Odin said. "And panicked," Harry said. "The forest was very quiet. Somewhere in the forbidden forest, something moved in the underbrush, and all 4 Asgardians registered it without turning, which Harry had always found subtly impressive." "This changes the tactical picture," Harry said. "Considerably," Odin agreed, Because I can't simply eliminate the Horcruxes and then face Voldemort, Harry said, because I'm one of them. You are not one of them, Odin said, and there was something in his voice that was not his usual measured authority, something harder. You are a boy who had something put in him without his consent. Those are not the same thing. No, Harry said. But they have the same practical consequence. He looked at the castle, warm and enormous in the early morning, smoke starting from its chimneys. If Voldemort reconstitutes himself and the fragment in me is the last tether between him and existence, killing him fully requires it to go too. Or removing it first, Odin said. Can you? Harry said. Odin's silence was its own kind of answer. Frigga, Harry said. She is researching it, Odin said, since yesterday. Since, Harry looked at him. She's known since yesterday and she did not want you to read it in a letter, Odin said simply. She wanted me to tell you in person. He paused. So did I. Harry stood in the February morning and looked at the trees and felt the quiet, dormant weight of a thing that shouldn't be there, that had been there almost his entire life, that he'd been carrying without knowing. He waited for fear. It didn't arrive. What arrived instead was the same feeling as the junkyard, not Mjolnir specifically, but the quality that Mjolnir recognized. A settling. A decision. All right, Harry said. All right, Odin said. Tell Frigga I'm not angry she sent you instead of writing, Harry said. She'll know, Odin said. She always knows. Tell her anyway, Harry said. I like saying it when I mean it. He looked at the Raven's guard at Sif, who was watching him with the expression she'd worn during their best sparring sessions, the look she reserved for opponents who had surprised her genuinely. You don't have to stay. I'll stay until morning, Sif said in the tone that closed the subject. Breakfast is in an hour, Harry said. I'll ask the kitchens. He looked at Odin's gray cloak and staff and the general architectural grandeur of his presence. There's a glamour room by the east entrance. You could pass as a visiting scholar. Odin looked at him. You're slightly conspicuous, Harry said. Odin's mouth moved. Visiting scholar, he said, as if testing the phrase for structural integrity. Or I could introduce you as yourself, Harry said, and let Dumbledore manage the diplomatic implications of the Allfather arriving unannounced. The scholar, Odin said. Dumbledore knew, of course. The wards told him the moment Odin stepped inside the castle, and he appeared at breakfast with the specific neutrality of a man who has discovered something significant at 6 in the morning and has had approximately 4 minutes to process it. He and Odin met in the entrance hall, which Harry attended, and the meeting between the greatest magical mind of the wizarding world and the Allfather of the 9 realms was one of the stranger things Harry had witnessed, which was a significant category. They were, he noted, similar in ways that neither of them would have appreciated being told. Both enormously intelligent, both accustomed to being the most consequential presence in any room, both operating with significant information hidden behind significant benevolence. Both of them, in this moment, performing cordiality while actually doing something much more rapid and comprehensive underneath it. Allfather, Dumbledore said and bowed just slightly, just enough. Headmaster, Odin said and inclined his head also just slightly, also just enough. The Ravens watched Dumbledore. Fawkes, who had materialized on Dumbledore's shoulder at some point, watched the Ravens. The Ravens watched Fawkes back. There is something we should discuss, Odin said, about the boy. There is, Dumbledore agreed. Harry stood between them and said, I'm present, you can speak to me directly. Both of them looked at him. Then with a synchronization that was almost comical, yes, they said, in identical tones. The 3 of them went to Dumbledore's office. The conversation that followed was the most direct and most honest that Harry had ever been in with Dumbledore, because Odin's presence functioned as a kind of atmospheric enforcement of honesty, something about being in the room with a being of that age, and that authority made strategic omission feel small in a way that it didn't otherwise. Dumbledore confirmed he had suspected Harry might be an unintentional Horcrux. Not known, suspected, since the end of Harry's first month at Hogwarts, when cross-referencing his observations of Harry's responses with existing Horcrux theory had produced a probability he found uncomfortable. He had been researching removal methods. He had not told Harry because he had not wanted to. He stopped, visibly reorganized, and finished the sentence honestly, because he had not known how to. That's a fair reason, Harry said. Dumbledore looked slightly surprised at this. It's genuinely difficult information to deliver, Harry said. I'm not dismissing the difficulty. I just need to know things even when they're difficult, especially when they're difficult. He paused. What did your research produce? The soul fragment is dormant because of your mother's magic, Dumbledore said. Removal would require either waking it sufficiently to expel it, which carries its own risks, or a destruction event specific enough to eliminate only the fragment without touching the host. The second, Harry said immediately. The theoretical mechanism for the second, Dumbledore said carefully, involves a magical event of sufficient sacrificial nature. He stopped. His expression did something complicated. The same kind of magic my mother used, Harry said. Yes. Which means, Harry said slowly, that someone choosing to die for me, not die, Dumbledore said quickly, and for once his voice was entirely stripped of performance and was just urgent and very human. Not necessarily, but a choice made in full love and full sacrifice without self-interest could theoretically create the same conditions. That's an enormous theoretically, Harry said. Yes, Dumbledore said, it is. Odin, who had been listening in his chair with the stillness of something very old and very patient, said, there is another possibility. Both Harry and Dumbledore looked at him. The fragment is suspended in a hostile environment, Odin said. Your mother's magic is the hostility. But the Asgardian energy Harry carries has been accumulating for 4 years. He looked at Harry. Frigga's assessment is that if the conditions reached a sufficient threshold, if the incompatibility became complete rather than partial, the fragment might not require external destruction. It might simply become untenable. You mean it dissolves, Harry said. Over time, Odin said, or under the right conditions, a significant magical event, proximity to something sufficiently light-saturated. He paused. We do not know the threshold. Harry looked between them, the old wizard and the older god, both brilliant, both careful, both watching him with the specific attention of people who understand consequences. So the options are, Harry said, wait and let it potentially become untenable on its own timeline, force a removal event that might require sacrifice, or find another way, Odin said, which Frigga is looking for. Frigga will find it, Harry said. This was not hope. It was simply his assessment of Frigga's capacity. Odin's mouth curved very slightly. Yes, he said, she will. Spring came to Hogwarts with the focused intensity of a season that knew it had limited time, and Harry spent it in 3 registers simultaneously: student, researcher, and observer. The student part was increasingly gratifying. His transfiguration had reached the level where McGonagall had begun showing him material from upper years, watching him work through it with an expression she wore for things she found genuinely excellent. His charms work was so advanced Flitwick had formally requested he assist with the lower year revision sessions, which Harry did with the patient pleasure of someone who finds teaching clarifying. Potions remained a productive antagonism with Snape. Harry's work was flawless enough that Snape could not mark him down, and had apparently decided to respond by giving him increasingly complex problems under the theory that failure would eventually arrive. It hadn't yet. The researcher part was him and Hermione, and Ron at the library table, building their understanding of Horcruxes and Voldemort's likely objects of attachment. It was painstaking and frequently frustrating, and occasionally brilliant. Hermione found a reference that suggested Voldemort would have used objects of personal or historical significance, which narrowed the field. Ron, who had a genuine gift for strategic thinking that his chess obsession had been developing his entire life, built a framework for likely timelines and options that Harry found impressive enough to copy into Frigga's journal. The observer part was watching the school breathe, watching Quirrell's empty classroom while a substitute stumbled through dark arts theory, watching Dumbledore in the Great Hall with the new baseline of their honest conversation, watching Draco Malfoy's complicated ongoing negotiation between who he was and who he'd been told to be. It was March when Draco appeared in the corridor outside the library with a piece of parchment in his hand and an expression Harry hadn't seen on him before, unguarded in the specific way of someone who has made a decision and is standing on the other side of it. I found something, Draco said. Harry took the parchment. Read it. It was a handwritten note in Lucius Malfoy's distinctive script. Harry had seen it in court records, cross-referenced it, referencing an object in the Malfoy Library's private collection described obliquely but clearly enough. T.M. Ars Diary, do not damage, preserve under dark seal. Harry looked up at Draco. My father's study, Draco said. His voice was even. His hands were not entirely. I found it in his files during Christmas. He stopped. I've been deciding what to do with it, and you decided to give it to me, Harry said. I decided to tell you it exists, Draco said with precision. Those are different things. They're not entirely, Harry said. Giving me this tells me where it is. That's the useful part. Draco looked at him steadily. My father will know someone found those files. Not necessarily when, Harry said. He'll know it was during Christmas, Draco said. He'll know who was home at Christmas. The steadiness in his voice cost something. Harry could see the cost in the slight tension at his jaw. I know what I'm doing. Harry looked at him for a moment. Why? Draco looked at the parchment in Harry's hand, then away, then back. Because I want to be, he stopped, reorganized. Because I've been thinking about what you said, on the grounds in December. He met Harry's eyes, about worth not being a performance. I remember, Harry said. If I sit on this, Draco said, it's because I'm afraid of my father, which means I'm performing for him, which is, he exhaled. I want to stop performing. Harry looked at him for a long, honest moment. This is going to have consequences for you, Harry said, not as a warning, as a fact. I know, Draco said. You should have someone who knows, Harry said. Someone you trust who's aware of what you've done. In case the consequences arrive in ways that need witnesses, Draco said dryly. Support, Harry said. Draco looked at him for a moment, with the particular expression of someone encountering an option they hadn't fully considered. Are you offering? I'm saying you shouldn't be alone in this, Harry said, practically and otherwise. Draco looked at the parchment again. Pansy knows, he said. I told her in January. She thinks I'm being an idiot. A pause, but she hasn't told anyone. Pansy Parkinson is loyal to you specifically, Harry said. Even when she disagrees with you, that's worth more than people who agree with you easily. Draco looked slightly startled. I'll deal with the diary, Harry said, carefully. You don't need to be involved in the next part. You're going to get into my father's library, Draco said. I'm going to ask Dumbledore to arrange a ministry access request, Harry said. For suspected dark artifacts, it's the right process. He folded the parchment. The evidence supports it. Draco looked at him for a moment with a complicated, layered look and then said in a tone that was as close to relief as he apparently got, right. He walked away. At the corner he stopped. Potter. Yes, the Quidditch final, Draco said. I intend to give you a proper contest. I expect nothing less, Harry said. Draco disappeared around the corner. Harry stood in the corridor with the piece of parchment in his hand and felt something settle, a piece moving into position, the way pieces moved in the long game plans that Loki had been teaching him since he was 9. He went to find Dumbledore. The process of the diary moved quickly once Dumbledore had the evidence. A ministry warrant issued in 4 days, citing Harry Potter's specific testimony as the proximate cause, which caused considerable friction with Lucius Malfoy that Harry followed in the Daily Prophet with the detached interest of someone watching a weather event they've seeded. The diary was retrieved. It was a Horcrux. Dumbledore confirmed this with a certainty that arrived in his expression as something close to grief, the grief of a man who has suspected a thing and hoped to be wrong. He destroyed it with a method he did not fully explain to Harry, which Harry accepted on the basis that this was still, despite their improved relationship, a process rather than a complete transformation. Some things Dumbledore needed to do in his own way. Harry could work within that. 2 confirmed, Hermione said, at the library table. 1 in Quirrell dispersed, 1 diary destroyed. The ring, Harry said. Hermione looked at him. What ring? Harry said, a piece of parchment on the table. It had a sketch on it, a ring with a black stone, drawn from a description in the Gaunt family records he'd found in the Ministry archives via a second-day research chain. The Gaunt family's ancestral home. Riddle would have gone there after Hogwarts before he became Voldemort publicly. He'd have taken something meaningful. Hermione stared at the sketch. How long have you? Since February, Harry said. I wanted to be certain before I said anything. Ron was looking at the parchment with an expression of focused calculation. That's 4, he said, if we count the one in Harry as a confirmed existing fragment. 7 is the number I expect, Harry said. I don't know why 7, there's something about magical number theory that makes 7 significant in a way I haven't fully mapped yet. Magical number theory, Hermione said, and reached for her notebook. Not today, Harry said. Today I want to talk about why Voldemort chose the objects he chose, because the pattern matters. They worked until the library closed. May arrived, and with it the end-of-year exams, which Harry took with the thoroughness of someone who found the testing of knowledge genuinely interesting rather than stressful. He finished the practical charms exam early enough that Flitwick had to generate additional exercises. He completed Transfiguration with enough time to review, which McGonagall clocked with an expression that was not quite a smile and almost was. He was walking back from the final exam, History of Magic, which had been an exercise in recalling things he'd actually lived adjacent to rather than studied, since a significant portion of wizarding history intersected with Asgardian history in ways that Binns, the ghost who taught it, was blissfully unaware of when he felt it. Not the Bifrost. Not Voldemort, something else. A pull toward the 3rd floor, specific and urgent, the kind of pull that Frigga had described as the gut's intelligence, faster than thought. He followed it without hesitation, through the second-floor corridor, up the staircase, past the turn where he'd followed Quirrell in October, and into the room where Fluffy had been. The trapdoor was open, not forced, opened, by someone with the knowledge of how. And Fluffy was asleep, which meant a flute, which meant he was through the trapdoor before the rest of the reasoning caught up. He fell through darkness and landed on something that gave beneath him with the soft resistance of plant matter, and he was on his feet in 3 seconds, Mjolnir already at full size in his right hand, casting its faint illumination in the darkness. Devil's Snare. He recognized it from herbology, looked up, could see the trapdoor 20 feet above him, and noted that a person unfamiliar with the plant's properties would have been badly tangled by now. Someone else had been here and gotten through already. He walked forward into the light of the next chamber. 700 keys, flying, chaotic, filling the air of an enormous room. A broom on a hook, a door on the far side, and the particular disruption in the flock's pattern that showed where something large had moved through them recently. Harry looked at the keys, looked at the broom. He didn't take the broom. He brought Mjolnir up, let the electricity that lived in it run down through the head into the air of the room, and the static field he generated pulled all 700 keys into stillness simultaneously. They hung in the air like a frozen moment, and he walked through them calmly, reading the door's keyhole, finding the old iron key by its position and its slight wear pattern, and unlocking the door in 30 seconds. The chess game beyond was enormous and beautiful in its way, giant pieces, stone and dark, arranged in their starting positions on a floor-sized board, designed to be played, required a player. Harry walked onto the board. The pieces moved to block him. He moved 3 times, not playing chess, not attempting to win the game conventionally, but moving specifically to clear the center path to the far door, taking pieces that needed taking, sacrificing nothing, using the game's own logic to route him directly through its most efficient line. McGonagall's chess set. McGonagall thought in straight lines with ruthless economy. Of course, the most direct path was available if you saw it. He was through in 4 minutes. The troll behind the next door was already unconscious. Someone had knocked it down before him. The fire obstacles, purple and black, he walked through with Mjolnir's protection extended around himself, and the bottles on the table were a logic puzzle Hermione would have solved in 30 seconds. Harry sat down, read the riddle on the parchment, mapped the relative volumes and positions, and identified the bottle that would get him through in approximately 25 seconds. He drank it. It was ice cold and tasted like winter. He went through the black fire. The Mirror of Eris stood in the center of the final chamber, and in front of it stood not Quirrell, but a man Harry had never met and recognized immediately. The presence of the fragment that had been in Quirrell's head was here, stronger now, differently housed, the entity before the mirror whole enough to have found its own form of expression. It wasn't a full body. It was an impression. A shape that the room's magic was trying to make real, hovering at the mirror's edge, staring into the glass with the desperation of something that has been reduced to nothing, and is trying to pull itself back from the nothing through sheer will. The stone, the shape said, without turning. It had a voice thin, overextended, like a voice stretched to its limit. It is in the mirror. I have been unable to reach it. I know, Harry said. The shape turned. It had what would have been a face, pale, flat, barely there, like the one under Quirrell's turban, but present in the room independently. The eyes were red, not bright. They'd been bright in Quirrell, alive with the energy of a host. These were dimmer, stretched. You have come alone, it said. Yes, Harry said. Why? Because this is between us, Harry said, and because I don't need help for this part. The red eyes moved over him, over Mjolnir, over the cord where the hammer had hung, over the ring on his right hand. Calculating. You know what you carry, the voice said. Since February, Harry said. Then you know that to truly destroy me. We've been through this, Harry said. In October, I know the stakes. I know what the prophecy says. He looked at the mirror. He could see himself in it, not his actual reflection, but the mirror's vision of his deepest desire, and what it showed him was nothing he hadn't known. Frigga and Thor and Odin and Loki, and beside them Ron and Hermione and Neville, all of them in the same place at once, Asgardian gold and Hogwarts stone combined. 2 worlds, 1 table. Harry in the center of it, not as a symbol or a champion, but as simply himself. Harry. He looked away from the mirror. He was not in the habit of wanting things at the expense of the present moment. The stone was in his pocket. He'd found it in the mirror at the same moment he'd stopped looking at his reflection. Use me, not want me, Dumbledore had said of the mirror, and Harry understood. Wanting the stone brought you nothing. Intending to use it rather than desire it put it in your hand. He closed his fingers around it. Give it to me, the voice said. No, Harry said. Shape moved forward fast, the way Quirrell had moved in the corridor, but without a body's hesitation, pure intention directed through diminished form. Harry brought Mjolnir up and the hammer's light expanded, gold-white and immediate, and the shape stopped moving. Not stopped in space, it physically stopped, held at the edge of the light like the moment before a wave breaks. "You can't destroy me fully," the voice said. "Not yet, not while the fragment remains." "I know," Harry said, "but I can do this." He stepped forward. The light from Mjolnir grew, not with effort. He wasn't trying, he was just holding it, walking toward the hovering shape with the calm of someone who has already worked out that fear is not relevant to this situation. The shape contracted. Not retreating, the same thing as October, the same incompatibility, the same oil and water dynamic, but now with 4 months more of Asgardian accumulation, 4 months more of being simply and completely himself in a hostile environment. He put out his left hand. The shape tried to flee. The room's magic, the mirror's magic, which was ancient and specific, held it. Harry's hand met the edge of the shape, and the contact was not warm this time. It was cold and bright and brief. The shape did not scream. It unmade this fragment, this piece, the one that had been in Quirrell, that had fled and reconstituted just enough to reach here. It came apart not violently, but like something releasing a breath it had been holding for 30 years. Harry stood in an empty chamber with Mjolnir in one hand and the Philosopher's Stone in the other, and the mirror behind him reflected nothing but the room. He was there for a moment. Then he walked back through the black fire. Dumbledore was at the trapdoor, which Harry expected, and Hermione and Ron were with him, which Harry had also expected because he knew his friends. Hermione's expression when she saw him, scanning him rapidly, checking relief arriving in the exhale, was the expression Harry thought of later when he tried to explain to Thor what having people was like. Ron said, "You had the stone the whole time, didn't you?" "Since the mirror," Harry said. "How? I'll explain later," Harry said. He held the stone up and looked at it, small, red, warm in his palm, ancient and strange. Then he held it out to Dumbledore. "For Nicola's Flamel." Dumbledore took it. His hand was slightly unsteady. The mirror's magic, Harry suspected, had not been entirely kind to whoever had approached it wanting things. He looked at Harry with eyes that were not performing anything at all. "Are you all right?" Dumbledore asked. "Yes," Harry said. "Then, honestly, I destroyed a fragment, one that had been in Quirrell. It found its way to the mirror." "I know," Dumbledore said quietly. "I felt it go." He looked at the stone, then at Harry. "The one you carry? Still dormant," Harry said. "I checked." He paused. "Frigga is still working on it." "As am I," Dumbledore said. They looked at each other, the old wizard and the 11-year-old, and the gap between them was not gone, not entirely, but it was different. Not chess pieces and player. More like two people who have agreed to walk in the same direction without pretending the path is simple. "The end-of-year feast," Harry said. "Tomorrow," Dumbledore said. "I have a feeling something will happen at the feast," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him carefully. "What kind of feeling?" Harry touched Loki's ring. "The family kind," he said. Chapter 6, Two Worlds. The end-of-year feast began at 6 o'clock, and Thor crashed it at 6:47, not metaphorically. The ceiling of the Great Hall, enchanted to reflect the June evening sky, warm and clear for the first time in weeks, lit up at 6:46 with a light that had nothing to do with sunset, and then the enormous oak doors blew open with a sound like a very polite thunderclap, and Thor walked in. He was not in his glamour. He was in full armor, with Mjolnir on his belt, his Mjolnir, the full-sized original, and his gold hair was loose, and his eyes were bright, and he had the expression of someone who had made an extremely solid decision about his evening plans, and was very happy with how this had unfolded. The Great Hall went absolutely, completely silent. 500 students, dozens of teachers, 4 house tables covered in the remains of an excellent feast, and every single person in the room stopped moving. A Hufflepuff third year dropped his fork. It hit the stone floor, and the sound was enormous. Thor looked around the hall with the uncomplicated delight of someone who enjoys making an entrance and has just made a good one. His gaze swept the 4 tables, the staff table, the enchanted ceiling, the floating candles, and then found Harry at the Gryffindor table and lit up with the specific joy of someone who has been away from their family for longer than they wanted. "Harry," Thor announced to the room at large. Harry stood up. "Thor." Thor crossed the Great Hall at a pace that was not technically running, but covered the ground very quickly, and the students on either side of the aisle between the tables pressed back instinctively, not from fear, more from the atmospheric effect of something very large moving with a lot of enthusiasm. He reached the Gryffindor table, grabbed Harry with both hands, and lifted him entirely off the ground in a hug that Harry returned with both arms and no visible concern. "You're well," Thor said into the top of Harry's head. "You are completely well. Look at you, you're taller. I've been taller for months, Harry said, muffled by shoulder armor. You saw me at Christmas. You're more taller, Thor said, which was not grammatically correct but expressed something real. He set Harry down and held him at arm's length with both enormous hands on Harry's shoulders, doing the same check that Harry recognized from every homecoming, systematic, rapid, the warrior's assessment for damage wrapped in the older brother's need to confirm intact. I'm fine, Harry said. Everything went fine. You destroyed a soul fragment, Thor said. Alone, Thor said before Harry could confirm this. It wasn't, the situation was, alone, Thor said again, not accusatorially. The word carried the weight of something he'd been sitting with for the last 24 hours since Odin had presumably told him. I had Mjolnir, Harry said. Thor looked at the hammer on Harry's cord, small, unassuming, the size of a charm, and then at Harry, and his expression did something complicated that resolved into the specific face he made when he was proud of something and found the pride too large to express simply. He pulled Harry into the hug again, briefly. Insufferable, Thor said. Absolutely insufferable. I learned from the best, Harry said. Behind Harry, the great hall had begun to produce sound again, not conversation, more like the collective exhale of 500 people deciding what register to operate in when a Norse god had crashed their school feast. The register it landed on, mostly, was fascinated. Ron, who was sitting 3 feet away with an expression of pure delight, said, "This is the best feast we've ever had, and I include the Halloween one." Hermione had her notebook out. She caught Harry's eye and put it away. Neville, on Harry's other side, was staring at Thor with the expression of someone who has read all the legends and is now sitting extremely close to them and finds the scale discrepancy between legend and reality significant. He's very large, Neville said quietly. He's aware, Harry said. He finds it useful. Dumbledore rose from the staff table. Harry watched this with interest. The headmaster moved with his usual measured grace, robes gathered, and his expression was the one Harry had catalogued as genuine rather than performed, which he'd been seeing more of since their conversation in the chamber, which he took as progress. "We are," Dumbledore said, his voice carrying the hall effortlessly, honored by an unexpected but very welcome visit. He looked at Thor with the look he reserved for things he found genuinely remarkable, which coming from Dumbledore was significant. "Welcome to Hogwarts, Prince Thor." Thor turned from Harry and looked at Dumbledore with the broad, open regard he gave everyone on first meeting, that sincere survey, completely unguarded, completely genuine. "Headmaster," he said. "I apologize for the doors. The doors are fine," McGonagall said, from the staff table, in a tone that suggested she was recording this for later personal recollection. "I had intended," Thor said, "to wait outside, but Heimdall said Harry was eating, which meant the feast was still ongoing, and it seemed rude to wait in the dark when there was a feast." He looked at the hall with uncomplicated pleasure. "It's an extraordinary ceiling. We're rather fond of it," Dumbledore said. "Is it actual sky or a replica?" "A replica that responds to actual atmospheric conditions," Dumbledore said. "It was charmed by a Hogwarts founder." "Asgard has a ceiling that does something similar in the Great Hall," Thor said, nodding seriously. "Though ours also has birds, which can be inconvenient during formal meals." He looked at Harry. "Can I sit down?" "It's not my feast," Harry said. "Mr. Potter's family is welcome at our table," Dumbledore said. Thor sat down at the Gryffindor table with the particular effect of someone whose physical presence reorganizes the space around them. Students on both sides shifted unconsciously to make room they hadn't needed to make but offered anyway. Thor picked up a goblet, someone's pumpkin juice, looked at it, set it down. "Do you have mead?" he asked, generally. "We can arrange that," said a house elf, who had materialized beside the table with the focused efficiency of Hogwarts kitchen staff responding to a guest request. Ron leaned across to Harry while Thor was exchanging pleasantries with a completely starstruck group of Gryffindor third years. "Did you know he was coming?" "I suspected," Harry said. "I told Dumbledore to expect something." "You could have told us," Hermione said. "I wanted to see your faces," Harry said honestly. Hermione looked at him. "That's a very low-key answer." "I've had some low-key influence," Harry agreed. Odin arrived at 7:30. No theatrical entrance this time, just Dumbledore's office door opening and the two of them walking into the hall together, which told Harry that Odin had come through proper channels this time rather than dropping from the sky, which was progress of a diplomatic sort. Odin had the glamour on, appearing as the visiting scholar he'd agreed to the first time, with the staff and the cloak and the single eye covered by conventional spectacles rather than a patch, which was a concession to blending in that Harry found both practical and mildly hilarious. The ravens were absent, which was a significant sacrifice for Odin, who was never entirely comfortable without them. He sat at the staff table beside Dumbledore, and the two of them talked with the body language of people who have found a frequency, not identical, not without friction, but mutually comprehensible in a way that they weren't 3 months ago. Frigga was not there. Harry had known she wouldn't be. Frigga's appearances in the mortal world were rare and deliberate, and she would not spend one on an end-of-year feast when she had specific work to do. But she had sent something, a small package that Odin placed in Harry's hands when Harry made his way to the staff table during the dessert course. Inside was a letter and a vial. The letter was 2 pages, dense, written in the Asgardian shorthand she used when she was working fast because she was excited. The gist of it, translated from the shorthand, cross-referenced against her own previous letters, was this: she had found something, not a removal method, not yet, but a mechanism of understanding. The fragment in Harry was not static, it was diminishing. Gradually, slowly, as she'd theorized, the Asgardian energy he carried was genuinely incompatible with it, and 4 years of accumulation had been doing work he hadn't felt. The vial contained a measuring potion of her own creation. Drink it, the color tells the state. The letter's final paragraph said, I estimate at the current rate 3 to 5 years. The fragment will become untenable on its own. You will not have to sacrifice anything. I want you to know this while the year is ending and you deserve something good. Come home in July. I will have the full picture by then. With all my love, Frigga. Harry stood at the staff table and read the letter twice and put it away. He was aware that Odin was watching him from 2 seats away, and Dumbledore from the other side, and that both of them had opinions about the letter's contents that they were respectively managing. He was also aware that the Great Hall was loud with end-of-year noise and celebration, and that at the Gryffindor table Thor had somehow got Neville to laugh at something. A real laugh, the kind Neville kept quiet, and Ron was explaining Quidditch tactical variations to someone who had made the mistake of asking a follow-up question, and Hermione was talking to a Ravenclaw girl about theoretical applications of magical number theory in a way that had the Ravenclaw looking delighted. He stood at the edge of the staff table and felt both worlds in the same room and let himself feel it completely, without managing it, without filing it for later. All right, Odin said quietly. Yes, Harry said. He held up the vial. She found something good. She always does, Odin said. Harry looked at him, this complicated, enormous, ancient being who had descended into a junkyard in Surrey for reasons he'd explained as the Hammer's choice, and which Harry had come over 4 years to understand were also his own. This king who had looked at a 7-year-old with cracked glasses and a twine belt and chosen to see something that everyone else had been consistently failing to look for. Thank you, Harry said, not for the feast, not for Frigga's letter, not for anything specific, for everything and the particular way it had accumulated. Odin looked at him for a moment. Then he put a hand briefly on Harry's shoulder, the same gesture as the Bifrost, the morning Harry had left for Hogwarts. Go back to your table, he said. Your friends are waiting. Harry went. The points were awarded after dessert. Dumbledore stood, and the hall quieted with the particular attentiveness of students who expected something notable and had correctly anticipated the evening's trajectory. Another year has ended, Dumbledore said, with the warmth that was real in him, the genuine love he had for the school and its annual rhythms. And before we turn to house points, I would like to acknowledge something that is not in any syllabus and cannot be graded. He looked at Harry, not with the managed look, not with the chess player's assessment, but simply and directly. Several students have shown this year that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in its presence. That loyalty is not proximity, but choice, made repeatedly. And that growing up is not the loss of wonder, but its refinement. He looked at the staff table, where Odin sat with his glamour and his stillness, and something passed between the headmaster and the All-Father that Harry couldn't quite read, but that felt like mutual acknowledgement. House points, Dumbledore said, returning to the hall. In 4th place, Hufflepuff with 312 points. Applause. In 3rd place, Ravenclaw with 352 points. More applause. In 2nd place, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted preemptively, and Dumbledore waited with the patience of a man who has been waiting out student noise for a very long time. With 412 points, Harry blinked. He hadn't been tracking house points, which was possibly a failure of attention. Gryffindor in 2nd meant Slytherin. The Slytherin table was celebrating with the composed enthusiasm of a house that had been in first for most of the year and had done the maths and was fairly certain. However, Dumbledore said, the hall went still. I have some last-minute points to award. He paused, in the way he paused when he wanted the next thing to land properly. To Miss Hermione Granger, for outstanding scholarship, exceptional research methodology, and the particular courage of sharing what you know when you might have kept it safe. 50 points. Hermione made a sound that was not quite a word. To Mr. Ronald Weasley, for strategic thinking of genuine excellence, for loyalty that expresses itself in showing up regardless of the outcome, and for being, in my long experience, the best kind of friend. 50 points. Ron stared at the head table with the expression of someone whose brain has briefly gone offline. To Mr. Neville Longbottom, Dumbledore said, and the hall went very quiet because Neville had gone very still, for finding, repeatedly, the courage to get up after being knocked down, which is a thing that sounds simple and is not. 10 points. Neville made a small, completely controlled sound and looked at his plate and did not look up for several seconds. And to Mr. Harry Potter, Dumbledore said, and whatever ambient noise remained in the hall went away entirely, for a year that has demonstrated, in ways that defy straightforward description, that the measure of a person is not what they were born to but what they choose. 60 points. The maths was obvious. Harry had tracked it without trying. Slytherin went from celebration to silence in the particular way of people who have had something taken away, and Harry looked immediately to the Slytherin table, not in triumph, but because he was paying attention, and found Draco. Draco was looking at the table. Then he looked up, and across the hall his gaze found Harry's, and his expression was the complicated layered one, and in it Harry saw something that had not been there in October or December or even March, something that was in the specific process of becoming something else. He gave Draco a small nod. Draco looked away, but the line of his shoulders changed. Slytherin's banners, which had been green and silver all year, confident and permanent, dissolved into red and gold, and the hall exploded. Harry sat in the noise and let it wash over him, and felt the specific warmth of Ron shouting on his left and Hermione, saying something very precise and very excited about the points differential on his right, and Thor at the end of the table raising an enormous cup of mead in what he clearly intended as a toast, and had to lower immediately because the cup was too large for the indoor ceiling clearance. He looked at the staff table. Dumbledore was smiling, genuinely, unperformed. He looked at Odin. The All-Father's glamoured face was still and composed, but the single visible eye, uncovered, because he'd apparently abandoned the spectacles at some point in the last hour, was warm in a way that anyone who hadn't spent 4 years learning to read it would have missed entirely. Harry raised his pumpkin juice in a small, private toast. Odin inclined his head. The corridor outside the Great Hall was a river of students moving toward dormitories and end-of-year celebrations, and Harry moved against it slightly, not out of stubbornness, just because he wanted a moment of the corridor's edges before the common room noise. Dumbledore fell into step beside him, with the ease of someone who knows when someone else needs the quiet version of something. They walked without speaking for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Dumbledore said. Harry looked at him sideways. "I had plans for you," Dumbledore said. Detailed, considered plans. Plans I had built over 10 years of thinking about the problem of Voldemort and the prophecy and what would need to happen. You were central to those plans in ways I did not disclose. You were in some of those plans a sacrifice I had convinced myself was necessary. Harry was quiet. "You were 7 years old," Dumbledore said, "in a junkyard in Surrey, and a hammer decided you were worthy, and instead of the manageable, grieving boy I had designed my plans around, you became this." He gestured slightly. "And my plans required adjustment." A pause. "Significant adjustment." "Are they adjusted?" Harry said. "Completely dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up," Dumbledore said with a rueful quality that was the most human Harry had heard him be. "The new version involves considerably more transparency and considerably less chess." "And the sacrifice," Harry said. Dumbledore stopped walking. Harry stopped with him. "The fragment," Dumbledore said, "will resolve itself. Frigga's research and my own have arrived at the same conclusion by different routes. You will not have to die for this, Harry, not in the way I feared." He met Harry's eyes, nothing behind them, no performance, no plan. "I am sorry that I did not tell you this sooner. I am sorry that I built a plan in which you were a piece rather than a person." Harry looked at him for a long moment. "You're telling me now," he said. "Yes, and you're going to keep telling me things going forward." "It is," Dumbledore said with the dry precision of a man who has made a genuine commitment and knows the cost of it, "my firm intention." Harry nodded. "Then the apology is accepted." He started walking again. "For the record, I never thought you were cruel. I thought you were accustomed to being the only person in the room who could see the whole picture, and that made you careless about asking whether other people wanted to see it too." Dumbledore walked beside him in silence for a moment. "That," he said, "is a more precise diagnosis than most people I know would manage. Frigga taught me that the most important diagnostic question for any person is, what do they believe they cannot share and why?" Harry said. Once you know that, you know almost everything. And what is it you believe you cannot share? Dumbledore said. Harry thought about it honestly. Less and less, he said, which is one of the better things this year has given me. The common room that night was the best kind of chaos, warm and loud, and lit by a fire that someone had encouraged to burn higher than strictly practical, with red and gold everything in Gryffindors who had been quiet all year, suddenly very much not quiet. Harry sat in the armchair nearest the fire and let it happen around him. Neville had claimed the chair next to his, and was sitting with the quiet solidity of someone who has had something confirmed tonight and is still processing it. Harry said nothing, gave him the space, and Neville, after a few minutes, said quietly, "The 50 points to Hermione and Ron, they earned those." "Yes," Harry said. "The 10 points to me," Neville said. Did you tell him to?" "No," Harry said. He looked at Neville directly. "Dumbledore sees what's there. He's very good at it, even when he uses what he sees badly. He sees you getting back up, Neville. That's not manufactured." Neville was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm scared all the time." "I know," Harry said. "It doesn't get less. It gets more navigable," Harry said, "which isn't the same as less, but it's better in practice." He paused. "The bravery isn't in not being scared. It's in knowing you're scared and going anyway. You do that every day. It doesn't feel like, it rarely does," Harry said, "from the inside." Neville looked at him with the expression of someone who has heard something that fits a shape they didn't have a name for. "How do you know?" "I was 7 years old and I went with a stranger to another world," Harry said. "I was terrified. I just didn't show it because I'd learned very early not to show things." He stretched his legs toward the fire. "Eventually you stop hiding it because you stop needing to. The fear is just part of the landscape, not the whole landscape." Neville absorbed this with the focused attention he brought to everything real. Then he straightened slightly, not dramatic, just a fraction. A fraction was enough. "I've been thinking," Neville said. "About herbology," Professor Sprout said. "She said I could work with her on some of the advanced propagation projects next year. Optional. She asked if I'd want to." "And do you?" Harry said. "Yes," Neville said, "very much." He said it with the particular simplicity of someone who has only recently discovered they're allowed to want things directly. "Then that's what you do," Harry said. Neville nodded. Somewhere across the room, Ron had apparently said something very funny about the look on the Slytherin table when the points flipped, and a wave of laughter moved through the common room. Hermione materialized beside Harry's armchair with 2 mugs of something warm and a pile of parchment that she was apparently incapable of not carrying even at a party. "Research," Harry said, looking at the parchment. "Summer reading list," she said. She handed him a mug. "I've organized it by subject and then by interdisciplinary relevance. Some of the Horcrux-adjacent material is in the restricted section, but Dumbledore said he'd arrange access over the summer for." She stopped. "You're smiling." "You organized a summer reading list at the end-of-year feast," Harry said. "It needed doing," Hermione said. "It absolutely needed doing," Harry agreed, and he meant it because that was what Hermione's relentlessness was. Not compulsion but genuine love for the work, the same as Frigga, and the sight of it was always, always good. Ron arrived with a 3rd mug and sat on the arm of Harry's chair with the comfortable disregard for furniture logistics that characterized his approach to most things. "All right," he said. "What's the plan for next year?" "Several things," Harry said. "The remaining fragments, when we know how many. Continuing to watch Voldemort's reconstitution timeline. 2nd-year curriculum, which is interesting. I've read ahead." "Of course you have," Ron said, without judgment, just acknowledgement. "And there's a tournament," Harry said. "Not next year, the year after, maybe the one after that. The Triwizard Tournament is being discussed in ministry circles. I've been reading the planning documents that are publicly available." He paused. "Voldemort will try to use it." "How do you know?" Hermione said. "Because it's exactly the kind of thing that provides opportunity without obvious mechanism," Harry said. 3 school champions, high stakes, magical contract, international attention. It's a perfect cover for someone who needs a distraction. Ron and Hermione exchanged the look they exchanged when they'd both caught up and wanted to exchange notes about it. Then Ron said, "So we prepare." "We prepare," Harry said. "Starting with the summer reading list," Hermione said firmly. "Starting with summer," Harry agreed, "and then the reading list." Thor found him on the grounds at midnight. This was not surprising. Thor's relationship with sleep was advisory rather than mandatory, and Harry had spent 4 years learning that if you went outside on a clear night in Asgard, you would eventually find Thor looking at the stars with the particular expression of someone doing something that looked like nothing and was actually quite a lot. Harry had gone outside because the common room had emptied gradually, and the night was warm and the grounds were lit by a moon that was almost full, and he needed to be in a space that held both his worlds and let them coexist. Thor was sitting on the edge of the lake in the full sense of on the edge, feet hanging over, Mjolnir beside him, looking at the dark water and the castle's reflection in it. Harry sat down beside him. Their Mjolnirs, both of them, sat between them on the grass, small and full-sized respectively, and something about the image was so fundamentally itself that Harry almost laughed. "You handled it well," Thor said. "All of it." "I had good preparation," Harry said. "You had good nature," Thor said, which was the distinction Thor had been making since the training yard. "Preparation works with nature, it doesn't create it." He paused. "The fragment gone. One more gone," Harry said. "More left." "How many?" "I think 7 total," Harry said. 2 eliminated. 5 remaining including the one I carry, which Frigga says is going away on its own." 5, Thor said. "We have time," Harry said, "and better information than we had a year ago. And allies who know the full picture." He paused. "Dumbledore is less of a complication than he was." "And the Dark Lord," Thor said. "Regrouping," Harry said. "He'll find another host, another method. He'll move more carefully because he's learned I'm not what he expected." He looked at the castle's reflection in the lake. "The dangerous version of him is the one who stopped being desperate. Right now he's still desperate. Desperate things make mistakes." Thor was quiet for a moment. Then, "I want to come to your Quidditch matches next year." Harry looked at him. "All of them, the important ones," Thor said. "Or all of them, they're all important. You'll need a glamour." "I'll wear a hat," Thor said. "That's not a very large hat, Thor." "I'll ask Loki for a glamour," Thor said, with the tone of someone who has identified the right answer and is mildly annoyed it took them a step. "He'll charge you for it," Harry said. "He charges me for everything," Thor said. "It's fine, he needs projects." They sat by the lake in the midnight quiet, and Hogwarts reflected in the dark water, and somewhere above them the stars were doing the things stars do, different ones than Asgard's, closer to the right distances, but beautiful in the ordinary way that ordinary things are when you know how to look at them. "Thor," Harry said. The first morning," Harry said. "In the junkyard, when Odin took my hand." He paused. "What did he say when he came back? About why he'd gone himself instead of sending someone?" Thor was quiet for a moment. "He said the hammer had chosen," Thor said, "and that anything the hammer chose was worth his personal attention." "That's not all he said," Harry said. "He knew Odin well enough to know that was not a complete account." Thor looked at the water. "He said he had sat on the high seat and seen all things," Thor said, "and that the boy in the junkyard was the first thing in 1,000 years that made him want to climb down from it." The lake was quiet. Something moved beneath the surface, the giant squid, probably, doing what giant squids do at midnight, which was apparently be somewhere enormous and calm. Harry processed this. He thought about the cupboard under the stairs, which had smelled like dust and loneliness. He thought about Aunt Petunia's expression and Vernon's red face and the particular weightlessness of being a child that nobody looks for because nobody thinks there's anything to find. He thought about the junkyard and the hammer and the way it had come up so easily, as if it had just been waiting for him to need something to hold onto. He thought about Frigga's letter in his pocket and the vial and 3 to 5 years and you will not have to sacrifice anything. He thought about the Great Hall tonight, Thor at the Gryffindor table making Neville laugh, Dumbledore and Odin sitting at the staff table finding their frequency, Ron and Hermione and the warmth of people who had chosen, repeatedly and specifically, to be there. "He made the right call," Harry said. "He usually does," Thor said. "He just doesn't always make it for the right reasons." He paused. "This time I think he did." "Yeah," Harry said. "Me too." He left for Asgard the next morning from platform 9 3/4, which involved explaining to the barrier that he needed to go the other direction. And the barrier appeared to accept this with the philosophical resignation of something very old and very used to the unexpected. He stood on the King's Cross platform, ordinary, gray-smelling of the particular combination of diesel and stone and other people's journeys that train stations have always smelled like, and felt the cord around his neck where Mjolnir hung, and Loki's ring on his right hand, and the Holly and Phoenix feather wand in his pocket, and the stone corridor warmth of Hogwarts somewhere behind him. He felt the Horcrux count more actions Claude Sonnet 4, 6 speak.